Hello, everyone, and welcome back to True Crime with Kendall Rae. Actually, the final episode of True Crime with Kendall Rae. Not forever, but for 2024. I can't believe it. This year just absolutely flew by. Does anyone else feel that way? I cannot believe it. Feels like it was January yesterday. But yes, I am about to take a break for the holidays, and I will be back January 7th. So it feels like quite a while that I, won't see you guys. But of course, connect with me on social media and we can stay in touch during the break. But yeah, I just wanted to give you guys a huge thank you for all of your support over this year. True Crime with Kendall Rae has had a great year. And, that goes to everyone who watches on YouTube, but also people who listen to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever else you can listen to the show. So I'm really, really grateful, and also grateful to my team who makes the show possible every single week. But I am really excited for 2025. I've got a lot of great content already planned in the works, and we will hit the ground running on January 7th. Also, we've got a lot of cool projects in the works right now for Higher Hope, which is my foundation, if you didn't know. And that brings me to my next reminder. First reminder, I don't know. My brain's not really firing at full capacity today. But if you didn't know, Mile Higher Media is doing our annual holiday matching program for donations. And this year we are doing it for our foundation, Higher Hope. And that means we are matching your donations dollar for dollar. So your gift goes twice as far. Now is a great time to donate. And also, 'tis the season, to give back. And of course, as a reminder, 100% of all of your donations does go directly to victims of violent crime and services for them and their families. So we are offering that through December 27th. You can find all the information below if you would like to donate. And huge thank you to everyone in advance who has already donated or is planning to donate. Really, we could not do all of this work without you guys. And obviously, just wanted to say once again, thank you for supporting the show, because that is also what funds Higher Hope. And I'm really proud of the work that we've been able to do so far. We've gotten a lot of grants done just since we've launched. And yeah, I can't wait to share more with you about what we're planning to do. But anyway, let's get into today's case, you guys. We're going to be talking about Sarah Stern. Now, this is a case that some of you, I feel, or maybe a decent amount of you, may have heard of. It has been covered by a variety of true crime shows, but it's been a while since it's gotten any big coverage, I believe. And the reason I say a lot of you may have heard of it is because Sarah was also a huge fan of YouTube, very clued into the whole scene in the early days. And there were some big creators that spoke out about her. And we do have a lot to go over here, so I am going to stop rambling and go ahead and get in. Now, I will warn you, this case is infuriating, as they are most of the time. It's very upsetting. What happened to Sarah is unbelievably heartbreaking, so unnecessary. And really, the person who did this to her is just truly evil. I don't know how else to explain it. From what I learned about Sarah Stern, she really seemed to be an incredible young woman who really had a beautiful and full life ahead of her. And the opportunity to live that life was ripped out from underneath her. My heart truly goes out to all of her loved ones, all of her friends, and especially to her dad, Michael, because he has been through hell and back the last few years. So let's start out like we always do by talking about who Sarah was. Sarah Lee Stern was born on March 24th, 1997 to her loving parents, Michael and Carla, who raised her in Neptune City, New Jersey as an only child. And growing up, Sarah really took an interest in sports, and by her freshman year at Neptune High School, she was already a member of the varsity softball team as well as the swim team, so very busy girl. But for as talented of an athlete that she was, Sarah really began to find passion for something else. Throughout high school, Sarah became more and more passionate about the arts. She loved drawing, painting, photography, digital media, really all of it. If it involved some type of creative expression, Sarah enjoyed doing it. And she was very, very talented. I wanted to share her favorite quote because I absolutely love this and I had never heard it myself. And that is, practice reckless optimism, which means not only maintaining a positive outlook on life, but believing things will work out even in circumstances where it doesn't seem like they will. I think that's something that all of us could hang on to and remind ourselves about on a daily basis. I just absolutely love that. Unfortunately, though, Sarah really did go through some hard times in her young life. In 2013, her mother actually passed away from cancer. She was in high school at the time, and I imagine art was, in some way sort of a form of therapy or an emotional release, a way for her to momentarily escape. And like I mentioned earlier, YouTube was also something that Sarah just loved and definitely helped her get through some immense loss of her mom and the pain that came with it. And I know so many of you can probably relate to that. I see comments constantly from you guys on all of our different shows saying things like, I'm having a really hard time right now, and this show is giving me a bit of joy or taking my mind off things. And that seemed to be what content creators and YouTube content, all of that really was for Sarah. And of course, she had some favorites, and I'm sure many of you will know who these people are. I was certainly a fan of them myself and still am. They're awesome. She absolutely loved Grace Helbig, Hannah Hart, and Mamrie Hart. She was such a huge fan of the three of them, especially as a trio, because they would do, collaboration videos and stuff. And honestly, the YouTube space in general, especially how it was back then, I feel like it's changed in a lot of ways. But when it first started, it was really a sense of community. And of course, there still is a bit of that now. I don't know. It was just a little different back then. I'm sure some of you know what I'm talking about. But Sarah really found community and made friends through the YouTube world. She was an avid attendee at VidCon, Comic-Con, Playlist Live, all of those conventions. And she would go and meet up with her internet friends and just have the best time together meeting the people that they looked up to. But two of her absolute favorite creators, and I'm sure a lot of you are big fans too, and I certainly am, Jenna Marbles and Julian Solomita. Now, Jenna obviously is no longer on the tube. We miss her. I miss her all the time. But yeah, Julian's still around. I believe he does streaming. And they're awesome. And Sarah just adored them. And she always made it a point to go and see them anytime they were at one of the conventions that she was at. So she had seen them several times. And so they obviously meet tons of fans, but they knew who she was. And after everything happened, they were quick to post about Sarah online. They raised awareness about her disappearance and offered condolences to her family. And it just goes to show how loved Sarah was and how much of a big impact her loss had on everyone that she met. Sarah was truly just a loyal friend, a thoughtful daughter, and someone whose laid-back and joyful personality made her easy to love. And her passing has been tremendously painful for everyone who had the opportunities to know and love her. Now, by 2016, Sarah was attending Brookdale Community College, where she studied TV production and art, and she was on the path towards a successful and creative future. But she never got the chance to live out her dreams because of what happened on December 2nd, 2016. And to explain what happened, I need to jump forward ever so slightly to the early morning hours of December 3rd. At 2:46 a.m., a 911 call was placed by an Uber driver who was passing over the Route 35 Belmar Bridge, and they reported an abandoned vehicle. And it didn't appear to him like there was an accident, but he decided to call it in anyway, and good thing he did.
911, where's the emergency?
Not emergency. Actually on the Belmar Bridge, right after heading south in the middle of the bridge, there's a car that's abandoned. It's off to the side of the road. But
the Belmar Bridge being the 35 bridge?
Yeah, the 35 bridge would be going from north going south.
Into Belmar?
Into Belmar, yeah.
Right. Hey, did you pass the midpoint? Because up to the midpoint is Neptune, and after the midpoint is Belmar.
So yeah, Neptune actually. Technically it was after, it looked like it was more on the Neptune side.
So what kind of car is it?
Kind of looks like an old beat up, light tan colored, sedan.
And what was your name, sir?
So if it's okay, I'd just rather be anonymous.
And this is your cell number?
Yeah, I'm driving Uber and Lyft tonight, so I just figured I'd give a call in, because it's kind of hard to see, I think, if you're coming the other way.
And was there anybody inside the vehicle?
I looked, no.
Okay.
Unless they were sleeping. I couldn't see them by their head being up. Nobody looked like they were in it.
All right.
Then at 2:52 a.m., an officer arrived at the scene to find a silver 1994 sedan abandoned on the bridge. And no, there hadn't been an accident, but what concerned him was the fact that the keys were still in the ignition. Based on how it appeared, he did have to check for signs that this was possibly an unaliving attempt. However, there were no signs of a body or any personal belongings nearby at all. So he goes ahead and calls dispatch to try and figure out who this vehicle belongs to, as well as to get a tow truck over there to remove the car from the area. And he quickly learns that this car is registered to a woman named Lillian Stern, who is Sarah Stern's grandmother. But it wasn't Lillian who drove that car. It was Sarah. So their efforts that night were to try and get in touch with her. So they started out by reaching out to her cell phone carrier to ping her phone, hoping that maybe that would give them her last general location. And they were able to see that her phone last registered at 7:49 p.m. near her house. So they went over there, and meanwhile, Sarah's father, Michael, is getting a very scary phone call that no parent ever wants to get. He was actually out of town in Florida, and as soon as officers asked if he knew why Sarah's car would have been abandoned, he automatically just knew something was wrong. And so in the middle of the night, he began the long drive back to New Jersey, desperately trying to get in touch with his daughter. Now, back at their house, 2 officers are attempting to locate Sarah, and they decided to enter the house through the unlocked front door after repeated efforts to knock on doors and windows went unanswered. And inside the house, they performed an extensive search, not only looking for Sarah, but for anyone who could help explain where she was and why her car may have been left on the bridge. But there was nobody inside, and the only sign of life was Sarah's dog, Buddy, who had been left in his cage. Now, anyone who knew Sarah would tell you that that was incredibly strange, very out of character for her, because she loved her dog Buddy more than anything in the world. And there was no chance that she would have just left him in a cage like that, especially if she wasn't planning on returning. So the officers continued to look for Sarah, and their next attempt was to go to another house to look for Sarah. Now, how they made the connection to this house is a little bit unclear, but they somehow figured out that Sarah was really close friends with a guy named Liam McAtasney. And when they get to the house, they realize that it's actually Liam's mom's house and he no longer lives there, but she was able to point them in his direction.
Is Liam home? What was that?
11 Street.
Oh, he's staying over there? No, we're looking for a friend of his that's possibly a missing person, and she supposedly hangs out with him. Does he, Sarah Stern, does he hang out with her? He's at 12 Holly?
11 Holly Street.
11 Holly?
Might be over there.
Yeah, of course.
Can you call Liam, if you don't mind?
Now, Liam and Sarah had been friends since grade school, and they had always been really close. They really bonded over their love of video games and comic books as well. They just had a lot of similar interests. And then during freshman year of high school, Liam became friends with another student, Preston Taylor. And over time, the 3 of them became sort of a group. They actually called themselves the Squad. And if it gives you any idea of just how close they were, Preston actually took Sarah to junior prom. And from what I can tell, the 3 of them continued to stay close after graduation. Liam and Preston actually lived together in a house that was owned by Liam's parents, and it was actually only a block or 2 from where Sarah lived. So in the midst of what is going on, officers think maybe there's a chance that Sarah is over at this house that Liam and Preston live in together. And just as they're about to leave Liam's mom's house, a neighbor comes outside and tells them some interesting information. It turns out that the day before, December 2nd, Sarah had texted this neighbor asking if she could bring a bin over of her mother's belongings. Now, this neighbor, Miss Draper, wasn't home, but she had told Sarah that it was fine and that she could stop by and drop it off. She also mentioned to officers that Sarah might have been depressed, and whether or not that was true, it was important information at the time while they tried to determine what happened.
So she brought a bin of stuff of her mother's to your house?
Taped over, and it's in my kitchen. I was out. I said, yes, I'll put it in the cubby. And, I tried texting her and nothing.
That's my next question. Is she depressed? Is she...
I think she's depressed.
Is she...
Mm-hmm.
Not suicidal anyway, do you think?
I don't know.
And obviously, officers had to consider the idea that maybe she really did take her own life that night. I mean, it kind of looked that way, especially with this neighbor now telling them that she was depressed and her car is found abandoned on the bridge, keys still in the ignition. It didn't look good. And over the years, through all the cases that I've covered, I've seen so many instances where officers lock in on that theory way too soon. They put blinders on and they think, okay, this person took their own life, and that's the only thing they want to focus on, sort of taking the easy way out, Luckily, that was not the case here. It was definitely in the back of their minds because it certainly did look like a possibility, but they continued to search for Sarah, or at the very least, try to figure out where she may have possibly gone. And even though it was 4 a.m., Liam's house was next on their list.
Liam. You Liam? You got a second? Can I come in and talk to you real quick?
Yeah, no problem, officer.
Is Sarah here by chance?
No,
When was the last time you talked to her?
I was with her today,
What time?
before I went to work.
So it was earlier today?
Yeah.
When was the last time you had any kind of contact at all with her? Turn some light on if you don't mind.
I mean, we went to get food today.
And you went to work at what time?
4:30.
Okay, so you haven't talked to her since 4:30? You have
No.
a cell phone you can reach out to her on?
I actually haven't been able to find my cell phone.
Any idea where it's at?
Calling it all day.
He then goes on to say something that would end up being critical in this case, and it's something that you are going to hear repeated a few times throughout this episode. And that is that Sarah wanted to get away from her crazy dad and move to Canada. Take a listen.
What was her mindset last time you talked to her?
I just know she's been trying to get away. And tell me she's going to Canada.
Trying to get away, okay. Canada, she's been real depressed lately?
Her dad is crazy.
Okay, and then she's dealing with the loss of her mother. Her dad's in
Yeah.
Florida right now, right?
Her dad, yeah.
So right there, what you just heard is Liam setting the scene, planting the seed, trying to build a storyline. The idea that Sarah was depressed, that she and her dad had a terrible relationship, and that she wanted to run away to Canada. Now, the Canada bit of the story is true. Sarah had visited Canada once, absolutely loved it, and it was no secret that she wanted to move there one day. She had told several friends and family members, and her dad said that she was very intent on going there one day and that he was in full support of her making that move as long as she got a job or did some type of study abroad program. But according to Liam, Sarah wanted to go there to escape this so-called terrible life that she was living. And so between what that neighbor said about her being depressed and what Liam is telling them about her, having this miserable life, hating her dad, wanting to get away, a theory is beginning to form. Two theories, actually. One being that maybe she really did jump, or the other being that maybe she ran away. And by this point, nothing is pointing to foul play. And they definitely didn't take that off the table, but these other two theories seemed pretty likely given the information that they had. But without knowing anything for sure, these search efforts continued. Soon after Sarah went missing, a $5,000 reward was posted, and the community effort to find her really kicked into full gear. And people just absolutely came out in huge numbers to support their family. They walked through neighborhoods and knocked on doors, and boat crews even went out onto Shark River in search of a body. But a big concern, though, was the fact that Shark River feeds into the Atlantic Ocean. So if she was really in the water, the likelihood that she was swept out to sea was not only possible, but honestly probable. Now, meanwhile, on that first day, Liam ended up speaking with authorities for a second time. And since he was the last person to see Sarah, he became a crucial part of the investigation. And much like the first conversation, officers wanted to try to confirm the timeline of his and Sarah's day together, as well as get a better understanding of her recent mindset.
Yeah, between 1 and 2, we went to Taco Bell.
Let me ask you, did you have your phone around then?
I did actually, yeah. It wasn't until I went to work that I realized I didn't have it on me. I went to the neighbor's house at one point. I couldn't even tell you what time that was, but
Which neighbor?
the Drapers.
Were you with her when you went over there?
Yeah.
She was with you?
We had she had a bunch of stuff. I know that we had one big gray container, and I actually have a few of these in my basement right now.
Of hers?
Of hers, yeah. If you guys want to go through those, she's just been trying to get stuff out of the house away from her dad.
What's her reasoning for wanting to get the stuff out of her father's?
I mean, I know that her dad's taken money from her in the past.
Okay.
I think her mom was supposed to leave her money or something. I know she definitely has a lot of trust issues with her dad.
What's going on with her? Like, how's she been acting lately?
The
same? Different?
No.
Liam, you've known her since first grade, you said.
Yeah.
Has she been different than normal lately?
Well,
And for how long?
in the past, she has had a tendency to have self-destructive suicidal behavior. I actually know that
How long ago?
years ago.
And what was it that she would be self-destructive and suicidal? Sorry,
It was over
stepping on you.
over something her dad did. I'm not too sure because it was, I think it was my freshman year, sophomore year of high school.
Mhm.
I'm in my second year of college right now.
4 or 5 years ago.
But
Mhm.
I remember being with my girlfriend. She was completely obsessed with my girlfriend. And something happened with her dad. My girlfriend had to leave to go take care of her because she was saying, if you don't come here right now, I'm going to kill myself. Taco Bell first,
Then to the Drapers.
Drapers,
And then you left.
then to her house,
Then to her house.
hung out.
Right.
I left.
What time was that around?
4:45.
45.
Yeah.
And then you worked till when?
I worked until 10 o'clock.
Okay.
I was supposed to work until midnight, but I got off at 10 o'clock.
And you just came back here?
Yeah, I went back there
Who was with you?
with my roommate.
So, like you just heard, Liam pretty much said the same thing he said earlier that morning, but this time he went into more detail, not just about Sarah and her dad or Sarah and her mental health, but also about their movements that day, which according to Liam was going to Taco Bell, dropping the bin off at the neighbor's house, then returning to Sarah's house where they hung out until he went to work sometime around 4:45 p.m. Now, this conversation went on a lot longer, but overall the gist was the same. But this time officers were really like, listen, dude, we've got a lot of manpower out looking for Sarah, and if you know something, you need to tell us. But Liam seems like he is equally as concerned and has no information to give them, so the conversation ends there and the search continues. So that brings us to December 4th, and by this point, the Monmouth County Prosecutor's Office and New Jersey State Police join in on the search effort, joining the U.S. Coast Guard and other local law enforcement agencies. So yeah, a lot of manpower. And days later, another massive civilian search effort took place where friends, family, and community members did everything they could to try and locate her, including Liam McAtasney and his roommate Preston Taylor, who I mentioned earlier, both good friends of Sarah's. And during these searches, Liam and Preston both did interviews on the local media talking about how badly they wanted to find their friend, how concerned they are, trying to rally other people to help, things like that. And their cooperation and overall concern is really interesting, especially when it comes from Liam. It seemed like he really wanted to help. And he even agreed to come into the station again for questioning. And this time it was on December 6th.
So we appreciate him coming down and talk to us. Obviously, we're very concerned about Sarah. Who do you live with, Liam?
I live with my roommate, Preston Taylor.
You friends with Sarah also?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we all went to high school together.
Was she ever your girlfriend?
No. We actually have reason to believe that she could be a lesbian. She has been known to obsess over girls in the past, though. One of my ex-girlfriends, a few years ago, she was completely obsessed with her. She just would always say stuff like, Maggie, if you don't come here right now, I'm going to kill myself. Or there have been multiple occasions where my ex-girlfriend Maggie has had to go to the Draper's house to help her with either her dad. I can't say for sure if her dad was going to do something, but there has been a few occasions where she said, my dad's going to hurt me or I'm going to hurt myself in the past. I can't say that anything's ever gotten violent, but I know that there's a lot of fighting all the time. There's just constant fighting between her and her father.
What about school?
Last year, she did a full year of school. And this year, she hasn't even registered for classes.
You know why?
Canada, I guess. She's just insane. She needs to get away, go to Canada, get away from her dad.
Do you think her behavior was odd?
Yeah, I didn't think it at first, but she's always wanted to go to Canada. She's always been obsessed with Canada.
So again, with the seeds, he just keeps on planting them. And eventually, he talks about the last time that he saw Sarah. So here's that.
Do this. Let's start the day on Friday.
Okay.
What did you do when you woke up on Friday?
Slept in.
Till what time?
Noon.
Okay. What did you do? You got up.
Did some dishes, cleaned up the house. Then I called her initially, asked her if she wanted to get some food. She said she had to.
What time did you hook up with Sarah?
sometime between 1 and 2 o'clock. I went over. I helped her.
Did you go to eat?
Not yet. We did go to eat, but we initially wrapped up all of her stuff, put it in the containers, and then went across the street to the Drapers. And Sarah and I stuck the bell.
You eat there?
No, we went back to her house.
Did you stay there the whole time after you went back to her house?
Yeah. We actually went up into her and played some video games. We were playing the video games. We might have went downstairs, and then I left.
Did she talk to you about wanting to leave?
She had that day.
What did she say?
She just said that her dad was coming home. She had to get the stuff out, and she just needed to get to Canada. I didn't think she would actually go through with it. But this whole Canada thing is just trying to escape the situation she was in, I guess. With her dad.
Now, shortly after this, the two detectives briefly left the room, and when they came back in, they jumped right into a line of questioning about information they knew Liam had been withholding. And before I play that clip, I need to give some context, and this next bit is one of the most crucial components of this case, so listen carefully. A few months before Sarah went missing, she was at their family's second home, which was in Avon-by-the-Sea, New Jersey. And while she was there, she ends up coming across a shoebox filled with cash in the house. Like a lot of cash. I don't have the exact number, but it was in the thousands upon thousands. So a lot of money for a young girl to come across, surprisingly, in this shoebox. But the thing is, though, the money was in pretty terrible condition. Not only was it old currency in terms of the way the bills actually looked, but a lot of them were broken and brittle. Definitely the kind of money that would have been flagged if someone had tried to use it. And that's not to say that she couldn't use it, but, it was questionable for sure. Now, as for where the money came from, it turns out that her mom had left it for her. So it was hers to take, but she was cautioned by other family members not to tell anyone about it. And of course, that's good advice. And I'm guessing that was mainly because they felt that, when you come into a lot of money, people get greedy and can do some weird things. However, Sarah didn't listen to that advice. Of course, she's young, and she ends up telling a couple people that she thought she could trust, close friends, about this money. To be clear, she wasn't just going around telling tons of people about it. But yeah, there were a few people that she told, and Liam was one of those people. But what she didn't know is that Liam then went and ran his mouth and told a bunch of people about this money. And he told people, these were his actual words, that it's the type of money that someone would kill for. Literally, those are his exact words. Anyway, this money ends up going into a safety deposit box in a local bank. And after Sarah went missing, investigators found out about it. So they end up getting search warrants for the surveillance footage at the bank, as well as for the safety deposit box itself. And what they found made them rethink everything, because it turns out that Sarah had gone to the bank on the exact day that she went missing. And of course, that is something that Liam had left out. And even though she did pull some of the money out that day, there was still $25,000 left in the safety deposit box. And what 19-year-old is going to run away to Canada and not take every penny that she has? Why would she leave behind $25,000, even if it wasn't in great condition? And obviously, it's because she didn't run away. And officers were now starting to realize that. And keep in mind, it had only been 3 days by this point since Sarah had went missing, and there was no evidence to suggest that Sarah actually ran away to Canada. In fact, during a search of her home, investigators ended up finding her passport and social security card, as well as US and Canadian currency, clearly indicating that Sarah never left New Jersey, which now leaves them with two main theories. Either she took her own life, or someone took it from her. And not that a short video from surveillance footage can tell you that much about someone's mental state, but when investigators reviewed the footage, Sarah seemed to have been in good spirits that day. She was smiling, she waved at the bank teller, and she just didn't look like a person who was on the verge of ending her life. But they still didn't take that theory off the table because, quite frankly, they couldn't take anything off the table at this point, at least not without more evidence. So they kept searching for answers, which brings me back to Liam's interview. When the two detectives came back into the room after stepping away, they asked Liam why he never told them about their trip to the bank. Seems like a big detail, because based on the time that Sarah went there on the 2nd, they knew Liam would have been with her. And here is his response.
You haven't told us about the bank. Yeah. How come you haven't told us about the bank? Did you go to the bank?
I was with her.
Okay.
That's the way back to Taco Bell.
Then what'd you do at the bank?
I have no idea. I didn't go in.
Stay in the car?
Yeah.
Why didn't you stop at the bank? What did she tell you she was stopping at the bank for?
Something to do for money. I don't know. She had found money in Avon House a few months ago. And, she has a lockbox full of money in there. I don't know. She was taking money out, putting money in there.
A lockbox full of money where?
In the Carney Bank.
How do you know?
She's told me.
How much money?
I couldn't tell you. She never told me. She told me a range. She said it could be from 20 grand to 100 grand. She wasn't sure.
So clearly he's playing down the whole bank thing pretty significantly, and also his knowledge about the money. I mean, he did admit to knowing about it, but he made it seem like he knew very little. And truth be told, they don't end up pressing him too much about it at this point, even though him neglecting to tell them that information is a pretty big red flag. And another massive red flag was that at one point, Liam asked them, quote, if she did jump off the bridge, what are the odds that she's not somewhere all the way out in the ocean by now? What kind of question even is that? I mean, he's not asking anything out of concern for his friend, like, what are you doing to look for her? Have you looked into X, Y, and Z? None of that. He specifically wants to know what the chances are that her body will be found if it's actually in the water. Now, you're actually going to hear me say later that he wanted her body to be found, but I'll explain that when I get there. But that interview ended up being around 2 hours long, and it was only stopped because both Liam's mom and dad independently called an attorney, which isn't shocking. Of course, his parents are going to call attorneys, and any good attorney is going to tell you not to talk to the police. So that was the end of that. Well, I should say that that was the end of that for that day, because that definitely was not the end. They had a lot more questions for Liam. But rather than bringing Liam back in, they decided to bring in his roommate, Preston. So the next day, Preston was brought in to answer some questions. And truth be told, there weren't any inconsistencies in his story compared to Liam's. But one thing that's important to know about Preston's interviews is that he seemed to really try to distance himself from Sarah as much as possible. He called her a mutual friend, which definitely contradicts some of the stories about their friendship.
Did you socialize with Sarah? Did you talk to her on a regular basis, or?
Not on a regular basis. So we hung out like when everyone all got together and talked to her, but that was really it. We didn't really speak too much.
Okay, it's more just if you saw her out, you guys
More like mutual friends and everything else.
He then goes on and talks about his movements that day and also provides an alibi for Liam, which was that he saw Liam right before he, Preston, went to work, when Liam came home and tried to find his phone, and after work as well, when he came home and the two of them got drunk and played video games. And at one point, they go ahead and just ask Preston what he thinks happened to Sarah, and he says that he thinks she jumped.
What do you think happened?
I think she jumped.
Okay, why do you think she jumped?
Some of the stories I've heard about what they saw with Sarah and her dad.
And so right there in that moment, Preston is trying to do exactly what Liam is trying to do. Plant that seed that Sarah wanted to take her own life because of her father. Now, his interview was also around 2 hours long, and while he didn't say anything overtly incriminating, the detectives walked away from it feeling like something was off. So, once again, it was back to trying to find Sarah. Not that searches had stopped, but you know what I'm saying. Throughout December and early January, the search for Sarah and the search for answers continued, and her loved ones were met with disappointment with every day that passed. But hope wasn't lost, because just a few weeks later, investigators investigators caught a major break in the case. In January of 2017, 7 weeks after Sarah disappeared, a former classmate of hers named Anthony Curry came forward, and what he had to say shook this case wide open. So it turns out Anthony had become friends with Liam their junior year of high school, and the two of them had sort of bonded over their love of film. Anthony is an aspiring film director, so he was always working on projects, and Liam would sometimes get involved. And on Thanksgiving Day of 2016, just about a week before Sarah went missing, Liam came to Anthony with an idea for a movie. And this next bit blew my mind, and you guys aren't even ready for this, okay? Liam tells Anthony that he has this great idea for a movie plot. He has this idea about killing a girl, specifically strangling her and then throwing her over a bridge with the help of a friend. And that's his great idea for a movie. Okay? And Anthony hears this and is like, okay, dude, what the fuck are you talking about? He said that he had no intention of making a movie out of this, was like, this is so weird. I don't even know how to respond to it. And he actually had just forgotten about it. But then when Sarah went missing, Anthony had heard about it, and it took him a few weeks to remember back to that conversation. All of a sudden, it dawned on him, that was a really weird conversation that I had with Liam. It took a few weeks to click in his mind, but once it did, he was like, oh my God, I need to tell authorities about this immediately. And as all of this is going on, Liam ends up Snapchatting Anthony and casually just asks him if the cops have asked him to come in yet. So when Anthony does go in to speak with authorities, he tells them that the messages sounded like Liam was worried that the cops were going to find out about something. And that is actually the point where he made the connection between that movie plot and what was actively going on with Sarah. And I'm so glad that he was able to make this connection and didn't just take the route of, oh, I don't want to get involved in this. He really did the right thing here. And he was very smart about how he did it, because if you're not familiar with Snapchat, and to be honest, I haven't used Snapchat in forever, but I do know that when I used to use it, and back when they were using this in 2016, 2017, when a Snapchat comes in, it's meant to be temporarily seen. I don't know if you can revert back to the messages, but, it disappears, at least if it's a photo message. But he also knew that if you take a screenshot of a Snapchat, it alerts the person that you took that screenshot. So he was smart enough to realize, okay, he can't know that I'm documenting this. So he gets the idea to grab his digital camera and he takes a photo of his phone so that he has this evidence, and he brings it in to detectives. And by doing that, he ended up being a significant part of this case, because he allowed for detectives to make not one, but 2 arrests. And Anthony's help doesn't stop there, because on January 31st, he ends up participating in a sting operation that involved him meeting up with Liam to see if he would confess to what investigators now believe he did. And Liam, clearly not the brightest of bulbs, he agrees to meet up with him. He takes the bait. So to kick off the sting operation, Anthony messages Liam via Snapchat, and he tells him, hey man, I was working on some type of set and my camera broke. He tells him he dropped it into a bucket of fake blood, like stage blood or whatever, prop blood, and that he's all bummed. He needs to get a new camera and asks him for some money for the new camera. So they talk back and forth for a while, and then the conversation ends with them agreeing to meet up in person. And by this point, investigators believe that Liam had not only murdered Sarah, but that he had done so in order to obtain all of that money that she had found a few months earlier. Now, I do have some footage available that I can play for you guys from the sting operation of the confession. However, I'm only going to be playing certain parts of it. There's a lot of it that's really disturbing, and it horrified me, honestly, to listen to it, and it feels like it's not helpful or necessary to share a lot of that. Of course, you can look it up on your own, but yeah, I'm only going to be playing what's necessary to understand the case.
Good, money. What's happening, buddy? How you doing? You can't blame me for doing this, right? I gotta feel you up real quick, right? No disrespect. I'll show you. No disrespect, okay? Nothing. Yeah, I got the FBI on my ass, dude. What are they questioning? Oh yeah, a lot. About what? About killing Sarah. They've been, they were up my ass. First, it was just normal police. They were on my ass, and I had to go in and get interrogated by them multiple times. But then it kept moving up levels, and now it's a federal case. Then got the FBI.
So you've been laying low, I guess.
Oh, yeah. And that's not even the worst part. The worst part of it is I thought I was walking out 50 grand, 100 grand in my pocket. She had one safe, and she took money out, and she only had 10 grand. And this money, I don't know if it was brick or something. It's fucking old money, terrible quality. I don't even know if I can put any of it in the fucking bank.
Right, because it'll probably look sketchy, right?
Looks sketchy, and it'll look like it's Sarah's money, especially if it's a federal investigation.
Right. So what, do you have it hidden?
Yeah.
Where'd you hide it?
Sandy Hook. First, it was in my house for a long time, but then I stopped trusting Preston.
Yeah, what's the deal with Preston? Was he...
No, he's cool.
Did he end up, like, helping you or not?
Oh, yeah. I had planned Sarah's situation for me to be interrogated by cops. Like, that was whole part of my plan, to make me look not guilty.
Did you end up still out? Like,
you didn't hear about it? It was all over the news.
Right, but I didn't know if you, like, was doing.
Yeah. And the worst part is, we threw her off the bridge, and the body never showed up.
So just imagine how Anthony is feeling when Liam is feeling him up, essentially, for this wire. He's got to be shitting bricks. And the detectives who worked on this case said that even, in that moment, they were like, oh my God, this could get bad. Of course, they were nearby in case anything happened, but they were very worried. And really, again, hats off to Anthony, because he was very brave to do that. So the next part of the confession tape, I have decided to not include in this episode. Again, because it's so horrible that I just don't feel it's necessary to play. But I'm going to explain it to you. So he says that after going to the bank and coming home to count the money, that's when he strangled Sarah. This part genuinely just made me want to throw up. But he mentions how her dog watched the entire time it happened. He also talks about how the dog didn't do anything, didn't bark, didn't try to help her, saying that the dog is a bad dog. It was so vile and like inhuman to hear someone speak that way. And this was also just so disturbing to hear, but he talked about how he had set a timer on his phone to see how long it took for him to kill her. I mean, what kind of sicko even thinks to do something like that? Thinks in advance, okay, I want to see how long this takes me. It's so bizarre. It really gives you a glimpse into the dark, twisted mind of Liam. He also tells Anthony that after he killed her, he had to leave for work, which is when he realized that he lost his phone.
So, I have to leave. I fucking dropped my phone at Sarah's house. My phone was at Sarah's house. Like...
Wait, you left your phone?
Yeah, I lost it. I couldn't find it. I had to go to work. I had timed everything out so that...
Why did you take your phone? You should have left it in your fucking pocket.
Dude, I couldn't find it, dude. It ended up being out in the driveway.
Oh, it must have dropped out of your pocket.
It must have dropped when I was crawling to get in the car.
I think what's so disturbing about these clips from his confession is just how nonchalant he is. He's so casual, has no emotion as he's talking about murdering someone he was friends with for a long time, an innocent girl who did absolutely nothing to deserve this. And it seems like he is trying to show off to Anthony, like he's proud of what he's done. It's sick. It's so hard to wrap your mind around how people can act this way. And this happens a lot in true crime. We see people speak about what they do in this casual way that is just so disturbing. But anyway, he then goes on to explain how Preston fits into all of this, which was moving her body after he went to work.
And then I had to go straight to work. So Preston came over, took the body, put it in the bushes.
Now, this next clip, I want to warn you, it's not easy to listen to, but it's basically Liam talking about what they did after he got off work and what he said their plan was.
Preston and I go over to her house, take her safe, bring that over to my house before we do anything. Then we take
her body out of the bushes and drag it over to her back fence. And I crawl, get into her car, and I back up. There's a security camera across the street.
Right.
So I had to act like her. I watched her every time she backed out. She does the same thing. So I backed out exactly like she did. My plan was, for me, I underestimated my own strength and how much a dead body would weigh. Because
It's lint weight.
yeah, I got up on top of the bridge to throw her off. My plan was I was going to throw her off, jump over the divider, and get into Preston's car.
So I want to cut it off there because it's just not helpful to share. But he essentially goes on to say that because he couldn't lift her on his own, Preston circled around to the same side of the bridge he was on and they threw her over the edge together. And it got even more graphic after that. And I truly can't even find the words to describe what a sick monster Liam is. I mean, this sick fuck clearly didn't even feel bad about what he did at all.
This is the thing about, like, heists. There's so much shit that you can't account for.
You don't know.
Yeah. You don't know until it happens. I planned this thing out for like 6 months. And I didn't get a lot of money, but I had enough money to just be, like, living comfortably in my house, tripping, throwing parties all the time. I don't feel any different. I don't think about it. You always think you're going to try these new things and you're going to change.
But it didn't change.
It just doesn't do anything.
So yeah, overall, just very heavy, disturbing footage, and I really don't have anything else to say about that. Liam is disgusting, and I need to just move on now. But luckily, what's next is good news, at least comparatively, I guess. And that's that the following day, February 1st, the first of 2 arrests were made. Now, surprisingly, investigators actually started with Preston, and Preston turned on Liam so fucking fast and just spilled absolutely everything. You guys heard most of it through the confession tapes, or the parts of it that I did play, but there are a few more gaps that I need to fill in. So according to Preston, he had known about the plan to kill Sarah for several months. However, it originally started as a plan to rob her. But for whatever twisted reason, Liam decided that killing her was, and I feel gross even saying this, but the better option. He said that they even had a few ideas on how to kill her, but they settled on staging it to make it look like a suicide. What they didn't account for, though, was her body washing away, because these 2 sickos were planning on her body showing up as confirmation or proof that she took her own life. But obviously, that didn't happen. So then Preston goes on to say that on December 2nd, he received a Snapchat from Liam saying that he and Sarah were on their way to the bank. And he knew that this meant that Liam was planning to go forward with the plan. And after it was done, and after Liam went to work, Preston admitted to going to Sarah's house and moving her body from the bathroom to the backyard, where he put her next to a bush and covered her in leaves. While he was there, he also helped look for Liam's phone, and he was unsuccessful in finding it, so he went home and waited for Liam to finish work. And once he got off work, Preston says that the 2 of them went back to Sarah's house together, where they moved her from the backyard into the passenger seat of her car. And during that trip, they also stole the safe from Sarah's house and put it in Preston's car. And you guys already heard in the confession tapes what happened after that on the bridge. Oh, and Preston also admitted that he and Liam manufactured a fake story to throw detectives off, and that they purposely participated in the search efforts to make it seem like they were worried. And he even told them where he and Liam hid the money. He said that they buried Sarah's safe in Shark River Park, but that they put the money, which was about $10,000, in a different safe, and that safe was buried in Sandy Hook near the lighthouse. And he ended up doing more than just confessing. Preston actually went with investigators to Sarah's house and specifically reenacted what he and Liam did. And oh my God, it was incredibly chilling as he explained in detail, moving her body with absolutely no emotion, just completely heartless. He also went with detectives to Belmar Bridge and once again explained what they did and how they did it.
Liam had lifted Sarah's body by the shoulders and gotten her partially up onto the curb, where I then grabbed her by the legs and hoisted her up onto the railing And then I pushed her feet over so that she was going over the rest of the way.
Now, Liam's arrest came next, and as you've heard, there was quite a lot of evidence against him. But it was more than just the confession tape and Preston ratting him out. They ended up finding evidence that linked him directly to Sarah's stolen money, which I'm sure you have guessed by now that that was the motive for the murder. When investigators dug up the lockbox with Sarah's money, which they did with the help of Preston, they realized that it was a Sentry safe box with the number 002 on it. And what did they find on Liam's keychain when they arrested him? A key for a Sentry safe lockbox with the number 002 on it. Now, when he was brought in, he lawyered up right away, so they didn't even get to speak to him in any detail, but they didn't necessarily need to, because the evidence just spoke for him, including some digital evidence that I haven't even told you about yet. It actually turns out that there were 2 cameras pointed directly at the bridge that would have shown exactly what happened, but big surprise, they weren't working. How often are we going to see that in these cases? Oh my God. However, there is some good news. There was a camera on Sarah's neighbor's house that was pointing directly at her house, just so happened to have pointed in that direction. And while a lot of that footage did corroborate Liam's timeline of what he said that they did that day, a closer look at it showed something interesting. Now, the footage was super dark, so you can't see them moving her body into the car or even who was driving when they left the house, but they could see things that corroborated Preston's version of events. At the time Preston said he was at Sarah's house, they could see headlights from a car approaching her house from the back, as well as a person walking towards the back of the home. Now, even though it wasn't super clear footage, it definitely helped them confirm what Preston was saying about coming to her house that night to move her body. And this gave them at least more confidence. It was good enough evidence that he was telling the truth. Definitely wasn't a smoking gun, but it, was good enough evidence to support his confession. Now, the real smoking gun came during his testimony. So on April 24th, Preston accepted a plea deal where he would plead guilty and testify against Liam in exchange for prosecutors dropping certain charges and seeking a shorter sentence. And in the end, he pled guilty to robbery, conspiracy to commit robbery, desecrating human remains, conspiracy to desecrate human remains, and hindering apprehension. And because of the deal, prosecutors dropped the charge of felony murder and were recommending a maximum of 20 years in prison. When it came to Liam, though, there was no deal on the table for his sorry ass, and he was facing a ton of charges, including murder, felony murder, robbery, desecration of human remains, conspiracy to desecrate human remains, tampering with evidence, and hindering apprehension. Now, his trial began on January 23rd, 2019. And honestly, I just need to get right into what the defense strategy was because it may go down in history as one of the dumbest strategies I have ever heard, at least for one of their 3 big arguments. And their strategy, and you're not even going to fucking believe this, was that the confession he made to Anthony, the one that was recorded in the car, was an audition tape. An audition tape. I don't know. Unbelievable. I can't even believe professionals in this field, defense attorneys, would even try to say that. I mean, I've never heard it. Well, I probably have heard things that dumb, but that is up there. That is up there with some of the dumbest. Oh my God. I think all of you can agree that that is just absurd. That is putting it lightly. It is so fucking weird that they even tried to do that. And of course, they play the confession tape to the jury and they heard what we all heard. A confession, not an audition. An audition for what? For a movie? It's so weird. So their next 2 strategies sort of go hand in hand, but they said that because of lack of evidence, how do we know that Preston is telling the truth? Meaning, without a body, how do we know who the killer really was? And that's right, you guys. This is very upsetting to say, but Sarah's body has never been found. And based on the testimony of an ocean engineering expert, they don't believe her body was going to be found. After looking at the tide and the drift and current conditions from that day, They believe that within 24 hours of being put in that water, she would have already been pulled 7 miles offshore. But going back to Preston's testimony, though, the defense argued that for all we know, Preston could have done it since Liam was working that evening and Preston was home without an alibi. I mean, I don't know. I would argue that that confession tape is pretty sufficient evidence that Liam did it. But, oh, wait, I forgot. It's an audition tape. But anyway, their last argument came in the form of a witness. And this guy, his name is Craig Hetzel. And in my opinion, dude is a little out to lunch, I would say. But he testified that at around 5 a.m. on the morning of December 3rd, he was driving his son to work when he saw a girl walking alone down the street. He said that she would end up ducking into an alley, but not before she made eye contact with him for several seconds. Now, he swears up and down that this girl was Sarah. He is very, very confident that this was Sarah that he saw. But his story falls apart because of the timing of it, because he said that around the time he saw her, which was 5 a.m., he also saw the abandoned car on Belmar Bridge. But Sarah's car was towed hours before 5 a.m. And when he's been questioned about this, he's like, I don't know, that makes no sense to me. I know that I saw it and blah, blah, blah. And why would anyone lie about the timing of moving the car to protect Liam? It just doesn't make any sense. The prosecution is very confident that he is either confused or could be lying, but the dude is convinced that he saw Sarah, and he has even said things like, you know, Liam could be innocent, Sarah could still be out there, and it makes no sense. And honestly, it's pretty hurtful to her family. Now, as for the prosecution, I don't think I need to go over all of the evidence I've already shared. That's pretty much what was presented in court. But I will kind of give you the big picture, which is that Liam McAtasney intentionally and deliberately plotted Sarah's murder with the help of his friend, with the sole purpose of stealing what he believed was going to be $50,000 to $100,000. After doing so, he purposely misled investigators by feeding them inaccurate statements about Sarah's mental health and her relationship with her father, suggesting that she took her life or fled the country. Preston was the first to take the stand for the prosecution, and once again, he walked through the explicit details of their plan, which included months of plotting and even conducting a dry run to see how long the entire thing would take. He shared that because Sarah had discussed traveling to Canada, Liam saw an opportunity to get her to take her money out of the bank. He said that Liam basically convinced her to take the money out so that she could count it and start planning her trip. But when she did take it out, their plan was officially set in motion. Preston said that they considered several ways to take her life, but they decided that strangling would leave the least amount of evidence behind. He also testified that Liam told him exactly what to tell police when they inevitably came to question him, and he even said that it was part of their plan to be interrogated. Okay, dummies. Liam wanted them to be brought in so that they could paint the picture that Sarah was depressed and wanted to get away from her dad. But Sarah's relationship with her dad was nothing like they said it was. And God, Michael, that poor man, like he didn't go through enough. But to also have his relationship with his daughter misconstrued like that when it was so far from the truth. I mean, they did not have a terrible relationship or any of the bullshit that Liam was spreading. And that's just such salt in the wound on top of everything else. It's heartbreaking. He himself ended up testifying, and it was very, very emotional, but very helpful in proving that his relationship with his daughter was nothing like Liam said it was. In fact, in the last conversation they had, Michael had texted her a picture from Disney World, and she responded saying, "Wow, the castle looks so pretty with the lights." And that doesn't sound like a text of a daughter who is so desperate to get away from her dad. So another person that I wanted to mention and her testimony is Carly Draper. Now, she was a lifelong friend of Sarah's, and she was also her neighbor, so she was very close with her. And if you remember, it was actually the Draper's house that Sarah had dropped that box of stuff off on the day that she went missing. And when she was there, she saw Carly, and Sarah told her two important things. First, she told her about the money that she had found that her mom had left behind. And second, that she was planning on moving to Canada with Liam. Now, when it came to the money, Sarah told Carly that she was worried about how to keep it safe, considering it was a lot of cash. She also mentioned that she told others about it, including Liam. And when it came to what she said about her plans to move to Canada with him, Carly emphasized in her testimony that Sarah always had made these big plans to move and start fresh, but these were never plans that she had acted on. So she said that she didn't believe Sarah when she said that she was planning on moving, and she especially didn't believe that Sarah would take her own life. And this is such a heartbreaking detail, but when Carly found out that Sarah was missing, she was trying to DM her on Instagram, hoping that maybe she was out there and maybe she would respond to her. And she even said that if you're alive, create a fake account and follow me. Just make the name Disney or something so I know that you're okay. Carly seemed like a really great friend, if you ask me, and she actually did go to the police initially when all of this first started happening to tell them what she knew and what Sarah had told her that day. She knew that Sarah was a trusting person, which would make her vulnerable to someone like Liam. And it was important to her that police knew that she would never have walked away from her life so abruptly. Now, the next piece of testimony I want to go over is that of Anthony Curry's. And the day that he testified in court was a really tough day because that was the day that everyone had to watch the confession tape, including Michael, who broke down, as you can imagine, when they started playing it. I mean, hearing all of that, how evil it was, as a parent myself, I cannot imagine having to sit through that. Michael said that when he found out it was Liam behind it all, he honestly couldn't even believe it. I mean, this was a lifelong friend of his daughter, someone that he had seen grow up, was around for birthday parties and, events for school and things like that. And he was okay with killing her over some money. It's soulless, it's inhumane, it's pure evil, and it's the worst thing that a parent could ever have to comprehend. I don't even know how you would. But thankfully, the jury agreed. And on February 26th, 2019, Liam was found guilty on all charges. And 4 months later, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole plus 10 years. Preston, on the other hand, was given 18 years plus a $10,000 fine, and he will be up for parole in May of 2032. And I definitely want to hear your thoughts on that. Michael says these verdicts don't bring his daughter back, and ultimately, they don't make him feel better. In fact, he wishes that Liam got the death penalty. However, that was abolished in the state of New Jersey in 2007. He says that he is still haunted by what happened to Sarah, and that pain just doesn't go away when someone is sentenced. And what's even more painful is that both Liam and Preston have attempted to appeal their convictions, because of course they did, but thankfully both have been denied. Now, I do know that Liam's mom definitely doesn't think her son is guilty. I'm like, okay, you saw the tape too, right? There's this interview I saw of her where she's crying. I don't know. There's no tears coming out, so who knows? It's just super bizarre to me, and I understand that no parent would want to accept that your child could do something as heinous as kill another friend of theirs, but the evidence is overwhelming. To be in that much denial in the end and still stand by them, I don't know. It's pretty mind-blowing to me. I definitely want to hear what you guys think. But at the end of the day, there's only one thing to really be said, and that is that Sarah did not deserve any of this. That she had a whole life ahead of her, so many people who loved her, and, no one will get to see what she would have ended up doing with her life or what she would have accomplished or how many other lives she would have touched because of the selfish actions of Liam and Preston as well. And I think what's most devastating about this case is for this to have been done in such a brutal way by people that she trusted, people who she considered to be her friends. There aren't words. Since her passing, her loved ones have done so much to help keep her memory alive. They actually have a certain area of the Belmar Bridge that they have decorated in her honor. And in July of 2017, they held a celebration of life at the local community center where over 1,000 people gathered to celebrate her 19 beautiful years of life. And Michael says that it was amazing to see how many people came out in support of Sarah. That day was much more about celebrating her life than mourning her loss, which is exactly what he says his daughter would have wanted. Many people spoke that evening, including old teachers and friends, and everyone agreed that Sarah will be remembered for being unapologetically herself and living life with reckless optimism. I love that. And before I leave you today, I did want to share that Michael is raising money for the Sarah Lee Stern Scholarship Fund to support high school students in the arts. Art was Sarah's biggest passion in life, and giving to students like her is the best way he can think of to honor her memory. And I think it is the perfect way to honor her. So of course, this week I will be making a donation on behalf of this show. And if you are interested in making a donation as well, I will have a link below where you can do that. It's always hard to find the words to wrap up an episode like this. Really, it's always just hard to wrap up my episodes, but I wanted today to try and end this episode on a positive note in honor of Sarah, because she seemed to be such a positive and optimistic person. And so I'll leave you with this, Sarah's high school yearbook quote. Be yourself. Be yourself from the beginning to the end of time. Don't ever be what you think other people would want you to be. And that is actually a quote from Grace Helbig. I definitely want to hear your thoughts on this case as always, so let me know. That is going to be it for me today, you guys. Just a reminder, I am taking the next couple weeks off for the holidays. I hope you all have a lovely, safe holiday, and I will be back soon before you know it. January 7th, I believe I said. Let me double check on that. January 7th, 2025. Can you believe we're going into 2025? It's been 5 years since 2020. That's just really hard to wrap your mind around. But anyway, I will see you then. And as always, stay safe out there. Hey everyone, and happy holidays. It's Kendall.
And Josh from Mile Higher Media.
And as many of you guys know, we just recently launched our foundation, the Higher Hope Foundation. And now we are about to launch our annual matching program for the holiday season. So it's a great time to get involved, to give back, because your gift can go twice as far.
Thanks to all of your support thus far. We've already awarded several grants. We have several more in process, and we've got several exciting projects coming in 2025.
So if you're interested in getting involved and allowing us to do even more projects in the future, it is easier than ever to make a donation. You can do it right on our website, which is higherhope.org. And we've launched a new feature where you can create your own fundraiser. And you can access that by going to the Get Involved tab on our website.
So if you want your gift to be doubled right now through December 27th, Mile Higher Media will be matching all gifts.
And just as a reminder, 100% of your donations will go directly towards impacting victims of violent crime.
We just want to say a huge thank you in advance to everyone out there for all of your support, your generosity. And there's lots of other ways to help support the foundation. If you're not able to give a gift, just sharing our campaigns, the work that we're doing just helps get the word out and, helps us further our mission.
Yeah, truly, because of all of your support, so many people are getting the vital services and help that they need. And we're very, very grateful for your continued support. So thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to True Crime with Kendall Rae. Thank you so much, as always, for joining me. And if you're new, then welcome. I'm so happy to have you. And be sure to click subscribe so that you never miss an upload from me. So, guys, today we are talking about a case that actually came in through my members-only request form. And when I started looking into the details of this one, God, it pissed me off. It's just so unnecessary, so frustrating. We're going to be talking about Shanti Cooper Tronis. Shanti was an amazing person. She was a wonderful mother. She was very successful, very driven person who had a lot of friends, who was very loved by the people in her life. And her life was tragically stolen from her by her evil, monster, idiot of a husband, David Tronis. She and David were doing some home renovations, and not just like little home renovations. The home was a wreck, all thanks to David. And it was a pretty insane situation. I'll explain more. I don't want to give too much away yet. But that was sort of the catalyst that led to her murder. And in this episode, you're also going to be hearing a lot about her son, Jackson. And I just have to say, wow. What an amazing young man. I don't know if I would have the strength that he has had even as an adult, let alone a child, but he is just so impressive for his age, so mature and so wise. His biological father says that he really takes after his mom And I love that she sort of lives on through him since they are so similar. So let's just get into this case here because I have quite a bit to say. And right off the bat, I just want to say that obviously most of the time in my episodes, I spend quite a bit of time talking about the victim and who they were. And I really like to do that. I really love to learn about people. I find it really interesting to hear about people's lives, especially really amazing people like Shanti. However, this was a bit of a different situation because there isn't that much information available about her and especially her early life. So here's what I do know. We know that Shanti was born on January 22nd, 1979 and lived just outside of Orlando, Florida. And I can also tell you, like I already have, that she really was a great woman who made a lasting impact on the lives of those she surrounded herself with. She very much had a type A personality, which really suited her well in her career and allowed her to be really successful. She worked for a software company for a while, but then she ended up starting her own software business and was very successful with that. I saw an interview with a friend of hers who explained that Shanti was someone who would walk into a room and really just make an impact. Like you just noticed her and she was really just an unforgettable person. But the most important thing that you should know about her is that she really was an incredible mother. And by that, I mean, she lived and breathed for her son, Jackson. And everything that she did in her life was with the intention of showing him unconditional love and support. She and her first husband, Jim Cooper, got married and they were over the moon when they found out that they were pregnant with him. He was really a huge blessing in both of their lives. And the way that Jackson speaks about his mother to this day just really shows you what an impact she made on him in the years that they did have together. It's really beautiful to see. And he's been very vocal in the media about what happened to his mom. And the biggest message that he shares is that she is so much more than a victim. He says that she was the best mom that anyone could have asked for. He remembers how the two of them would always do fun things like going to the movies and theme parks together. And even though she'd sometimes chicken out before going on the rides, as I probably would too, she would eventually gain the courage and get on those rides with her son. And Jackson was only 8 years old when his mother was murdered. And even though he's a young teenager now, his maturity and the way he speaks and has handled all of this is just truly amazing to me.
She really liked to spend time with her family. She also loves her job. She loved what she did. Can't tell you what she did at all, but she definitely loved her family. She loved our dogs. She loves theme parks. We'd always go to theme parks, once or twice a month. She was scared to go on a lot of rides. She chickened out like 4 times, but she still went.
When work was done and we were able to relax, it was relaxing. Barbecues on the lake, just hanging out with friends, their kids, Jackson. Nothing crazy, just when it was time to relax, that's what we wanted to do.
No matter what kind of day she was having, she'd always have a smile on her face. She wouldn't let the bad things that happened that day affect the moment. She was a very great woman. Everything about her was outstanding. She was just overall the best mother that anyone could ever ask for.
Now, going back to her first husband, Jim, at first they had a really great relationship. Jim says that the two of them met while they were both out one night and that they didn't leave each other's side for the next 16 hours. They ended up dating, getting married, and in 2009, they got pregnant with Jackson, who, like I said, was just the light of both their lives. And like I said, for a long time, things were good. But at some point, things took a turn and Shanti was just very unhappy in the marriage. And that ended up leading her to be unfaithful to him, and they just couldn't work through things after that. And their divorce was not easy. It was actually pretty contentious, and Jim has talked about how, especially now looking back, he feels bad that he made it that way. And I mean, in the heat of the moment, divorces can get really messy and very, hurtful things can be said. It can drag on and just be absolutely draining and devastating for everyone involved. But eventually they got through it, they got past it, and they made sure that no matter what, Jackson knew that both of his parents loved him and that they were committed to raising him to the best of their ability. And so the two of them really did a great job of co-parenting, which is really all that matters at the end of the day, in my opinion. And that brings me to March of 2013. The divorce had finally gone through and Shanti was ready to move on and possibly find love again. And she found love pretty quickly, actually. That month, she connected with a man named David Tronis, through Match.com. And their relationship started the way that a lot of relationships start, especially when you meet someone online, just by exchanging messages. And it really seemed to just hit the ground running. They really bonded over the fact that they had both recently gone through a divorce and that they were looking for a second shot at love. And they seemed to find that second shot at love with each other. After a few months of doing the long distance thing, David left Minnesota and moved to the Orlando area where Shanti was living so that they could give their relationship a real chance. And by all accounts, everything seemed great, especially at the beginning. Her friends and family say that they were very much in love to the point where people around them were like, okay, enough, we get it. They were just kind of like all over each other and so into each other. But anyway, after living in Orlando for about a year and a half, David ended up buying the two of them a home in Delaney Park, which is a very idyllic, safe neighborhood. And he paid a little over $600,000 in cash, and this was supposed to be their dream home. And just by looking at it, it looks like it would be really anyone's dream home. They had a beautiful pool. It had some really beautiful architecture, palm trees surrounding it, green grass. I mean, really, they were going to be living the dream in this home, right? And sources say that in the beginning of their relationship, David really made it seem like he had all this money, like he was Mr. Moneybags. Some sources say that he was a successful engineer and he was able to retire early. And some sources talk about an inheritance worth a couple $1 million. But it seems like that may have not been the full picture. I mean, it's possible that he really did have all of this money and he was just really goddamn cheap. But I'd venture to say that he probably was not as rich as he was making it seem. And I say that because when they decided to renovate their house, which I mentioned earlier, Shanti was the one who ended up footing the bill, even though he was, like I said, Mr. Moneybags. And that ended up being a pretty high bill that Shanti had to pay for on her own, $250,000 to be exact, which is a lot for home renovation. And the house was really beautiful as it was, in my opinion. I mean, I think it was a bit outdated maybe. And according to David, that's why they wanted to do the renovation. I guess Shanti wanted something a little bit more modern. So they came to the conclusion that Shanti would run her business and work as she normally did. And David's job would be this renovation. And he worked as an engineer, so I'm guessing the dude just thought he was qualified to do this massive project, but that really could not have been further from the truth. At first, when the renovations began, the demolition was pretty basic, tearing down some walls, removing the floorboards, the usual. But as the months and then years went on, the house had become completely torn down to nothing. Like David just went wild with it and did it seemingly all at once. And I mean, literally not even the studs were left, okay? It was just destroyed on the inside, completely stripped down. And from the outside, the house looked fine. You would have no idea. But on the inside, there literally wasn't even a house. And obviously, it was completely unlivable. So David, Shanti, and Jackson, when Jackson was there, I mean, he did spend time with his dad as well, but they all ended up having to move into the garage, which had this upstairs kind of apartment type unit going on. It was basically like a 1-bedroom apartment with a full bathroom. And so it was livable, but it was certainly not enjoyable or ideal. David actually slept downstairs on the couch because he said that Shanti snored and he would sleep down there with the dogs. And then Shanti and Jackson would sleep upstairs. They had like a little kind of kitchen area with a burner so that they could do some cooking there. But it certainly was not an ideal situation, especially when they had this large house next door that was completely unusable. And obviously, of course, people have to make sacrifices during home renovations, and they were definitely more than willing to do that. But this wasn't a 6-month or even a year-long project. Their house had been under construction practically since they bought it. And by April of 2018, almost exactly 3 years later, it was in the worst condition it had been yet. And when I say that there was barely a house left outside of the outside structure, I mean it. Like a strong wind could have taken this house down. And I think anyone after 3 years of this, much longer than they expected, would start to feel pretty frustrated. And Shanti was definitely at that point. And not just because of the inconvenience of it all and the fact that she was paying for the entire renovation without David's help, but also, and this is a big but, David would not put her name on the deed. The two of them got married in 2017, and even after they were literally bound by marriage, he kept the deed in his mom's name. And also, David's plans for the house were just as unstable as the house itself. It sounds like he was just hiring and then firing construction crews left and right, and there didn't seem to be any clear path forward in getting any of the work done. And he was like obsessed with this renovation. I mean, it was all the dude could think about and spend time on, but at the same time, wasn't actually doing anything to get it done. In fact, he seemed to be delaying things quite a bit along the way. But that changed when he ended up reaching out to a man named Keith Ory. And now some of you may know Keith Ory, actually. He is a house flipper and builder who's located in the Orlando area, but he's best known for his reality TV house flipping series, which is called Zombie House Flipping. And the whole concept of the show, I'm sure you can imagine, as many home renovation shows are like this, but since this is zombie edition, they're taking the worst houses possible and then flipping them into something beautiful. And considering the condition that their house was in, it was the perfect candidate to be on the show. It was a zombie house. In fact, Keith said that when him and his team first looked at the house, they realized that the only thing keeping it standing was 2 inches of stucco. He actually even said in an interview that he did not understand how this house was still standing at all. It was totally shocking to him and his team, but hey, great opportunity for their show, right? And of course, it was a big opportunity for David and Shanti as well. I mean, at the very least, their house would be livable again. So Keith, of course, pitched it to the network. They were on board. He got the green light, and they were on track to start filming in just a couple of weeks. But that episode was never filmed because on April 24th, 2018, 39-year-old Shanti Cooper's life was taken from her. That day, at 3:51 p.m., David called 911 to report that he had just come home and found his wife unconscious in the bathtub. He said that he pulled her from the tub but was unable to get her to wake up despite CPR attempts. And I actually do have the 911 call to play for you, so take a listen.
Non-emergency, this call is recorded. Hello?
She's not breathing. I'm trying to do CPR. I can't.
Okay,
get her
listen to me.
I need help.
And who is this?
This is David.
Okay, your name is David? Okay, who is it that's not breathing?
Her wife.
Okay, sir, I need to take a deep breath. Take a deep breath. What happened?
I found her in the shower.
And she passed away? Is she awake right now?
No.
Is she breathing?
I can't wake her up. I tried to do CPR. I can't get her to breathe.
Can you get her out of the shower?
I pulled her out.
And you don't know what happened or when anything happened?
No.
Has she been sick or something?
Yeah, she's been sick, yes. Oh, God, what happened, baby? Baby.
When first responders arrived at the scene, they were honestly expecting to walk into a very tragic yet accidental slip and fall death. But when they walked in, they realized that that was not the case at all. I mean, that's how David had made it sound on the 911 call, but it was very clear that that was not the case. Because when they got upstairs, they saw that Shanti was lying on the floor of the bedroom with wounds that were indicative of a very brutal beating. Now, we know that David said that he moved her out of the bathroom, so her being in the bedroom wasn't that suspicious, but everything else about the scene was. In a typical slip and fall accident that ends fatally, you would expect to see 1, maybe even 2 pretty deep, serious wounds to the head. You know, you slip, maybe you hit your head in one spot and then fall back and hit it again. But that was not the case here. Shanti had a ton of injuries. First of all, both of her eye sockets were fractured. There was a hole in her cheek, a gash to her ear. Her nose was broken. She had bruising in several areas, and her hands and knees had abrasions on them. Another one of her injuries, which wasn't discovered until later on during her autopsy, was the fact that blood vessels in her eyes had burst, which is probably, as most of you know, a very strong indication of strangulation. In fact, strangulation was actually listed as her cause of death right next to blunt force trauma. So slip and fall? I don't think so. And what was also immediately sus, and one of the many reasons why David is such a goddamn idiot, is the fact that Shanti was completely dry. And everything was dry. The bathtub was dry, the floor was dry. There was no water anywhere. If she had slipped in the shower, you would expect her to be soaking wet, right? You'd expect there to be water on the floor. You'd expect, of course, the shower to be wet. You would expect David to be wet, considering he pulled her out of the shower. No, everything was dry. And so, of course, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize that he is lying and this is a homicide. And that's exactly how they treated it right from the start. And so that evening, David was asked to come into the Orlando Police Department's headquarters, and he did so willingly. He wasn't under arrest, which he was made well aware of. And for the next 14 hours, he sat in an interrogation room and answered questions about what happened. And honestly, he was seemingly very cooperative. He consented to them taking photographs of his body to look for defensive injuries, and even willingly gave them DNA swabs. But that cooperation did not make him innocent, of course, and what he said in the interrogation proved that pretty quickly. Now, I've watched a good amount of the interrogation footage, and it's quite fascinating. I'm going to insert as much of it as I can in here so that you guys can see for yourselves, but I've got to give a big shout out to the detectives who led this interrogation. They did a fantastic job. Their names are Barbara Sharp and Teresa Sprigg, and again, these two women just absolutely nailed it. When you see some of these clips, you're going to see just how ridiculous David was acting, how obvious it was that he was lying. But the two of them were really able to stick to the classic good cop strategy at first and kind of gain his trust, make him feel like they were being sympathetic to him. They wanted to make it seem like they believed him. And it was a great move. And they really tried to play up that sympathy quite a lot. Like you'll even see in one of the clips, the one I'm about to play actually, that one of them actually reached out and started kind of rubbing his knee, really trying to make him feel safe and, like I said, earn his trust. They were definitely trying to give the illusion of, we're here for you, David. You've been through so much. Tell us everything, you know? And they knew that he would sink his own ship pretty quickly.
Where were you born on? Here?
No, I was born in St. Paul, Minnesota.
And when did you move to Florida?
In 2013, 5 months after I met Shanti.
Did you meet her here or there?
No, why?
Then I'm lying. Okay. I'm sorry. Take your time.
After that, David went into his story of what happened and everything that led up to him walking in and finding his wife face down in the bathtub. And his story actually begins the night before. According to David, he was sleeping downstairs on the couch, as he usually did because of Shanti's sleep apnea and the fact that she snores. And then the following morning, he said he woke up and began cleaning their pool. Then sometime around 7 a.m., he says that Shanti comes downstairs for the first time that day, but apparently, she wasn't feeling well. She had actually chipped her tooth the day before, so she made a dentist appointment for that day, the 24th, to get it fixed. But she was a no-call, no-show to that appointment, and David makes it seem like she just missed the appointment because she wasn't feeling good. In total, David claimed that Shanti came downstairs 3 times that morning for various things, like to smoke a cigarette, for example. And he said that the 3rd time he saw her when she came downstairs was the last time that he saw her alive.
Tell me about Monday night. What happened?
We're getting ready to go to bed at midnight. We sleep separately most of the time. She has really severe sleep apnea.
So where would you sleep?
Downstairs on the couch.
You wake up Tuesday morning, and what do you do?
The pool was full of leaves from the magnolia, and I cleaned the pool out. She said she was going to try to sleep there a little bit, so I went. She came down after 7 o'clock all the way. She said she wasn't feeling very well. She had chipped her tooth the day before, and she had made a dentist appointment for this morning, but she said she wasn't sure if she wanted to go. How she found out again. That's how I saw it.
David then goes on to explain that sometime before noon, he left and took the dogs to the park where he spent 2 hours out walking them, and he sees nobody and then returns home around 2 p.m. From there, he says that he puts the dogs in their kennels, feeds them, and then returns to their backyard to clean up the courtyard and the pool for a second time. And in this next clip, you're going to see where he gets into finding her in the tub. And pay close attention to what he says about the water specifically.
What happens when you enter the home? Is anything unusual?
I could hear the water is running. I just walk upstairs. I didn't hear her. She's not saying anything. Doesn't seem right. She's submerged partially. One of her legs is kind of sticking up and out a little bit. The water in the tub was tinged with blood. I pulled her out into the other room. Didn't know what to do. At first I tried to do CPR. She was sticking. I was losing it. I thought I was losing her.
Her clothing is wet?
Yeah. She felt cold. I tried to lift her head. She's fighting. She has blood coming down her face. I grabbed the mattress cover and put it under her head. I wiped her face off again. I started crying.
Okay, so we all heard that, right? David is claiming that not only was she in the tub, but that she was wet. Okay, make that make sense. By the time that first responders get there, she is just magically completely dry. Absolutely not. So obviously, his story is not matching the crime scene whatsoever, let alone her injuries. And on top of all those injuries that I've already gone over with you, she was also already in rigor mortis when they got there, which I'm sure most of you, if you consume a lot of true crime content or possibly even work in the field, know what rigor mortis is. But if you don't, it's the natural stiffening of the muscles that occurs after someone dies. And it takes several hours to set in. So what does that tell us? It tells us that David is lying about the time when she died. It had to have been much earlier than he says it was. In fact, detectives actually believe that Shanti died the night before. And on top of her body already being in rigor, they later discovered that Shanti's phone showed 0 activity on the 24th. She actually had a work text come in around 6:58 a.m. that morning, and there is just no way in the world that she would have gone the entire day without answering. That's just not who she was. She really was professional when it came to her job, took it very seriously, and she would not have just blown off a text like that for no reason. And the last activity on her phone was around 11:30 p.m. on the night of the 23rd. And that's around the time that detectives estimate that she was killed. So we will talk more about that later, but let's get back to the interrogation of David. So like I was saying, David was giving them a bunch of stories that just made no sense. And it felt like he was trying too hard to paint this picture of their happy life. And he also did something really strange that I wanted to point out. During his interrogation, he mentions that he and Shanti actually had sex 2 nights before she died. And another thing that's important to note is a couple weeks before this, she had her appendix removed, which can be a pretty intense surgery, and she really wasn't feeling well for a while. But that Saturday, he said that she was feeling better and that the two of them decided to have sex.
We just found like a great rhythm, and we were both really, really happy. We were talking more, and it was great. We were really, really, really happy. And Saturday night, I think, was the first night that she really enjoyed just being kind of out and relaxing a little bit. Since her surgery, we haven't been able to have sex. And she wanted to try, and we did.
Here's why this is strange, though. And it's strange for a couple of reasons, but one of them being the fact that no one had asked him anything about their sex life. He just offered this information up. But also, what's very strange is that David mentions that while they were having sex, that Shanti ended up getting her period during it. And I'm telling you about this because detectives believe that this was his way of trying to explain why they might find blood on the bed and on the sheets. So clearly, David is just trying to get ahead of them, potentially asking about any blood that they have found. And the whole thing is coming across as very staged.
It was messy.
It was very messy. So are you saying that that blood is got somewhere?
It did get on the bedspread and it did get on the bed, on the sheet.
Is there something covering that up now or no?
We changed the sheets.
So there shouldn't be blood on the bed now, or is there?
There shouldn't be. She was bleeding when I brought her out of the tub. I would guess there is blood there. I would guess there is. So we picked up the sheets and we left it out.
But here's what's interesting about the blood, though. When that room was searched, detectives found blood in places that made no sense with what David was claiming happened. Okay, sure. So they have sex while she's on her period and they get blood on the bed, on the sheets, whatever. But they found blood on the wooden bed rails as well as the interior side of the bed frame. It seemed like the exterior side of the bed was wiped down, but if you removed the mattress and stood in the middle of the frame, you could see fresh blood dripping on that interior side. And this was no period blood. And as you can imagine, by this point in the interrogation, these two detectives had enough of his shit. They were done playing good cop and they were ready to go full bad cop mode and just call his dumbass out.
Talk around in circles. Trust me, the evidence and her body speak for itself. And your story is BS. You either made a mistake or you're cold-blooded killer. Which one are you? The injuries that this woman sustained, absolutely 100%, in my opinion, not possible from a slip and a fall in a bathtub. Did you two argue?
No, absolutely not.
Did you harm Shanti in any way?
Absolutely not.
Did you choke her?
Absolutely not.
Did you strangle her?
Without question, no.
Shanti did not fall and get those injuries.
Okay.
Without question. For you to see the significance of her injuries up close and personal like you did and come up with this cockamamie theory that she fell and hit her head is just baffling to me that you thought we would believe that. You strangled her. There is no one home but you. This is not looking good for you.
They also started asking him a lot about their living situation and the house and clearly what a stressful mess of a situation the renovation had been. And, asking if that had caused any stress on their relationship or, how they were dealing with that. But David, of course, just kept saying everything was fine between them. They, were doing just fine during this process. He specifically said that Shanti wasn't upset at all about how long things were taking and that she even was just fine with her name not being on the deed, which we definitely know is not true because she had told several people in her life that she was very upset about all of that. So at one point, late into the interrogation, David agrees to take a polygraph. But since it was in the middle of the night, there was nobody there to administer it. So ultimately, they ended up letting him leave. There just wasn't enough to make an arrest that night, but believe me, this was far from over. And I just want to make this clear, despite how guilty David seemed right off the bat, detectives definitely did their due diligence and looked into all other possibilities. So let's talk about some of the other theories that they considered. Of course, Shanti's ex-husband Jim was brought in for questioning as well because they just couldn't ignore the fact that the two of them had a, not so friendly divorce. But Jim's alibi was completely verifiable, not only for the 24th, but even for the night before. Plus, as time had passed, they really weren't on as bad of terms. So it just didn't seem like Jim really held any animosity towards her. Like I said earlier, the two of them were really co-parenting well, and they knew how important it was that both of them got along to some degree for his sake. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are wondering where was Jackson when all of this happened, and He was actually at school on the day that his mom was killed. His father, Jim, ended up getting a call around 4 o'clock from someone at the school who was asking if he would be able to pick him up, even though it was technically Shanti's day to get him. And Jim said that he knew something had to be wrong because it just was not like Shanti to fail to pick up her son. But of course, he couldn't imagine how bad the situation actually was. He didn't know why she didn't come to get him. So after picking Jackson up, he said that he made the biggest mistake of his life. And I feel so bad for him listening to some of his interviews, but he ends up driving to their house with Jackson. And he said that he truly regrets that decision because by the time they arrived, he unknowingly brought his son to the scene of his mother's death, which was swarming with police officers and crime scene tape. So as you can imagine, that was very traumatic for Jackson. And I listened to an interview with Jackson, and he talked about how it really took him some time, obviously, to accept that his mother was really gone. Like at first, it just didn't seem real. I mean, poor kid was only 8 years old, and this was just so unexpected. It's hard to grasp at that age that your mother is there one day and then the next she's just gone. So of course, it took him some time to really come to terms with what happened, and I'm really glad that his father has been able to be with him and raise him now on his own, but really help him through that pain and understand his emotions and feelings. I mean, Jim really does seem like an amazing guy, and I'm really thankful that Jackson has him. But anyway, let's get back to the other potential theories. So of course, another possibility that they had to consider was maybe this was a robbery gone wrong. Because when Shanti's body was discovered, she wasn't wearing her engagement ring. And her engagement ring was very important to her. It was something she was really proud of, and she always wore it. And it wasn't even found during any of the searches of their home. So the fact that it was missing definitely made them consider that maybe someone had broken in and stole it. But the problem with that theory is that nothing else of value in the home was taken. Not her cash or her credit cards or things like her iMac or TV, not even Jackson's Xbox or the diamond earring that was just sitting in plain sight on the bedside table. Nothing. So that theory just really fell flat pretty quickly. And then another theory was that maybe it was a scorned construction worker that had some issue with them. Maybe they killed Shanti. Like I said earlier, David was constantly hiring and firing these crews. So was it possible that he had pissed someone off and maybe they wanted revenge? But when detectives started exploring that more, that theory also fell flat pretty quickly. It didn't really make any sense. And sometimes the most obvious answer is the answer. And that obvious answer is David. As time went on, David became more and more obvious as the only person with the means, motive, and opportunity to kill his wife. However, he didn't take a back seat when they were building their case against him. Shortly after Shanti's death, David ended up hiring a defense attorney and private investigator, and they began sniffing around. They ended up going door to door, asking neighbors about any, quote, homeless people in the area. Basically trying to find anyone else to blame. And there was one guy that some people mentioned, and neighbors said that he looked like Woody Harrelson. And law enforcement tracked down this guy, and they spoke with him, and he was cleared. So no matter what other theories they looked into, everything just kept pointing back at David. And let me tell you guys, when they started looking deeper into David's life, they found some pretty shocking shit. It turns out that he was a member of Club Orlando, which is a fitness center and sauna for queer men. And an employee ended up coming forward and said that David had been a member there for months. And not only that, it turns out he came in 5 days before Shanti's death and then several days after she died.
State your full name.
My name is Arthur Adams.
We are now at the 7-Eleven. You work here?
Yes.
And you have a second job as well?
Yes.
Where is that?
At Club Orlando. It's a gay men's gym spa.
Is David a member of the club?
Yes.
How many times in the last 18 months do you think you've seen David on average?
Like at least twice a week.
And the last time you saw David at Club Orlando?
Maybe 5 days before the murder.
And this employee even said that he witnessed David perform oral sex on 2 separate occasions, but wasn't sure if it was with the same person or not. So it turns out that Mr. David seems to be living a double life. And there's actually a neighbor of theirs who had a very strange interaction with David while David was out on a run. And this neighbor is gay, and he asked David if his glasses were new. And he lowers them down and says, yes, they are. And now that I can see better, I can see how attractive you are. And the neighbor's like, okay, interesting. This took the neighbor by surprise, considering he thought he was straight and married, and he was obviously hitting on this guy. And obviously, it doesn't matter what David's sexuality is, but it does matter that David, whether he was with a man or a woman, he was still cheating on Shanti. And all of her loved ones say that they just don't believe she would have been okay with this. Of course, there is that small possibility that she did know, and maybe she accepted this side of David and his sexuality, and she allowed him to go to Club Orlando. Maybe she was fine with sort of having this open relationship. We don't really know, but anyone who was close with her said that they just don't believe that that was the case. And obviously, once investigators found out about this, a motive started to form. Was it possible that Shanti had found out about his secret and had threatened to leave him or expose him? Something like that. And in fact, one of her best friends, really her best friend, did an interview, and she talked about how there was one time where Shanti had called her and seemed very concerned, was saying things along the line of, I know too much and I need to get out of this. And then later on, she had called her up again and said, oh, everything's fine. And she felt like David was there when she made that call. So is it possible that she found out that he was living this double life and that made her angry about the infidelity aspect of things? Or, yeah, she was threatening to expose him or something like that. Or maybe she just threatened to stop paying for the home renovation. Maybe she didn't know about his double life at all, but she was just sick of footing that bill on a project that really wasn't going anywhere, that he seemingly was just continuing to make worse. Also, she had a $350,000 life insurance policy in her name with David listed as the beneficiary. And with that, plus other assets, he stood to gain about $1 million from her death. And as we know, people have been killed for a lot less. And on top of all of these other potential motives, their relationship, their marriage, certainly wasn't sunshine and rainbows. Not only was the house causing major problems between them, but Shanti's journal entries point to things being a lot worse than just house stress. In some of these journal entries, she wrote things like this: why do you treat the dogs better than me? Is it because they don't question you? And do you love me anymore? People who love each other don't act this way. Maybe it's time for a change. And I don't know about you, but those journal entries don't really strike me as being written by someone who's really, really happy, as David claimed she was.
We're both really, really happy, really, really happy, really, really happy.
And he actually took a video on his phone a week before the murder where he was sort of just walking through the house and showing the progress and whatnot. And at one point, Shanti and Jackson appear, and you can just tell by her body language that she was upset. She was really sick of his shit. Clearly something was going on, and other people noticed it too. There was times where she would call her best friend crying, saying things like, he won't let me go. And Jackson said he witnessed some domestic abuse in the house. And Jackson even said that David threatened to hurt him, a literal child. So that just tells you what a monster this man truly is and what he could be capable of. Oh, and that guy Keith from the zombie house flipping show also said that he witnessed tension between Shanti and David a week before she died. He had gone over there to do just a general meeting about production and sort of get the final green light from the two of them. And he said he noticed Shanti was just visibly upset and that she took off as soon as the meeting was over, which of course that alone doesn't prove that David killed her. But it certainly does show you the dynamic between the two of them in the days leading up to her murder. In the end, though, investigators did determine that only one person could have been responsible for this, and that was David Tronis. So on August 29th, 2018, David was arrested at his mommy's house where he had been living and was held without bail on charges of first-degree murder. And following his arrest, investigators searched his mom's house, and they ended up finding a crucial piece of evidence. Remember how Shanti's engagement ring was missing? Well, turns out David was the one who stole it. It was hidden in a suitcase in his room, and it's just further proof that some stranger didn't come into their house and kill her. And it doesn't end there. Because after his arrest, investigators got a tip that pointed them in the direction of his ex-wife, Carol. And it turns out that when David was still married to Carol, she just randomly got sick out of nowhere and could never really figure out what was wrong. And several of her friends believed that David may have been poisoning her, but detectives ended up traveling to Minnesota to meet with her, and surprisingly, she was pretty protective of him. Even though he cooked most of their meals and she could never really figure out what was wrong with her, she said that she just didn't think that he was poisoning her. Carol also said that she continued to be sick after they got divorced. So I guess that's something to consider as well. And there's certainly no definitive proof that he was poisoning her. What's interesting, though, is that when detectives looked into her and her marriage with him, they found out that she and David still shared a bank account together with quite a bit of money in it. Now, she had said that she just forgot to take her name off the account, but it has been speculated that maybe David was still funding her life in some ways and that maybe she felt the need to protect him because of that. And I'm not saying that that is the case or even if it's true. We don't know if it's true, but it is information that has been reported. So I wanted to share that with you. I also did bring that up though, because detectives did wonder if maybe Shanti was being poisoned. Earlier, I mentioned that she had her appendix removed not too long before she was killed. And they actually went to the hospital to see if maybe they still had her appendix and that they could possibly test it for any type of poison. Unfortunately, they did not still have her appendix, so they weren't able to do that, but it was definitely something that they were considering. Like maybe David had tried to kill her in a non-violent way and then possibly resorted to something violent when that didn't work. On the poisoning note, though, while David was still in jail, his cellmate ended up coming forward and told detectives something really strange. He said that he and David were bonding over their shared love of hallucinogens. And David mentioned this type of tree frog that produces a poisonous sap. There are actually a couple of frogs out there that produce a hallucinogenic. So I'm not sure exactly which one he was talking about. But anyway, apparently, according to this cellmate, he told him that you can put it in salsa and kill someone with it. And not only did he say that, but apparently, according to this cellmate, David admitted to killing Shanti to him. Now, none of what he said can be corroborated, so I didn't want to spend too much time on it, but it's something interesting to note. But there is one more big thing that happened about a year after David was first arrested, and it has to do with a phone call that the lead prosecutor on this case got. That prosecutor is Ryan Vecchio, and he said that in his entire career, nothing like this has ever happened to him. But one day he got a call, and it was from David's defense attorney, and he tells him that he had a piece of physical evidence that they never disclosed. And it was a pair of bloody bed sheets. Now, if you remember, earlier I mentioned David's story about having sex with Shanti and the fact that she supposedly got her period. And he said this because he thought it was possible that they may find some bloody bed sheets. But the thing is, they never actually found them. In fact, when they first got to the crime scene, it looked like the bed had been freshly made with a very clean set of sheets. And sure, he did say that they changed the bed sheets, but to the detectives, it looked like these sheets had literally just been put on the bed that day, not 2 days earlier when he said they did. Now, 11 months later, after he gets this phone call, he realizes that the defense had those sheets all along. So how did that happen? Well, in total, there were 3 search warrants conducted on David and Shanti's home. It turns out that in searches 1 and 2, the sheets were there, and the truth is investigators just missed them. But they were there and they were up on a shelf. But by search number 3, they were just gone. And we know this because photos were taken during each one of these searches, and you can literally see on the shelf from searches 1 and 2 that the sheets were there. But by the 3rd search, the photo shows that those sheets were missing. I mentioned earlier that David and his attorney had hired a private investigator, and it turns out that this private investigator had found the sheets between searches 2 and 3, and he was instructed to collect them. And there's even surveillance footage from outside of David's house showing the PI carrying what could have been that evidence into a car. And the PI said that he was told that they were going to submit the sheets for testing to prove that the blood was from Shanti's period. Because period blood actually produces different protein than regular blood, so their plan was to test the sheets and then prove that they weren't from Shanti being attacked. Here's the thing though, those sheets sat in a locker for 11 months and they were never tested. And once detectives got them, they did end up testing them, but unfortunately, they couldn't determine where the blood came from. And believe it or not, that is not the only evidence that this defense attorney was just hanging on to, or potential evidence, I should say. I guess they had also collected a green cord from the scene, and their excuse for taking this was to protect David from taking his life. But detectives believed that this cord could have actually been used to strangle Shanti. Now, they did test it, and they didn't find any DNA on it, but it was speculated that maybe David could have wiped it down, making this the second thing that the defense withheld. And this attorney didn't even get in trouble. Imagine that. That's Florida for you, folks. And no shade to Florida. Beautiful state. I love it. My mom lives there. But wild things happen there, and people seem to get away with a lot down there. I will say that he did end up dropping David as a client, so I guess there's that, but yeah, whatever. So a different defense attorney took over the case in 2020, and he has had a lot to say about everything. So let's get into the trial now, because there's a lot to say about that. 5.5 years after Shanti's murder, David's trial began in October of 2023. After several delays pushed the trial back. And for a while, he tried to claim that he wasn't mentally fit to stand trial because he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. But a judge ruled that he was totally competent. So like I normally do, I want to walk you through what the defense was arguing and what the prosecution was arguing. And let's start with the prosecution. Earlier, I explained that detectives believe Shanti was actually killed the night before David said she died. And part of that theory had to do with the fact that her cell phone wasn't used until after 11:30 p.m. on the 23rd. Now, what I didn't mention earlier is the fact that only one of Shanti's diamond earrings was found on the bedside table. The other earring was still in her ear, which starts to paint a picture of what could have really happened. So during the trial, the prosecution painted a picture of a violent attack that occurred on the night of the 23rd while Shanti was taking off her earrings before bed. They say that while her head was turned to take out the other earring, David became enraged by an argument that they were having, and he began attacking her. This would explain why only one earring was removed, and also why she didn't use her phone at all the next day. It would also explain why there was so much blood on the bed frame, on the carpet, on the sheets, because that's where the attack happened, not some slip and fall in the bathroom. Now, as for what they believe enraged David, the prosecution argued a couple of things, and first and foremost, of course, the house. The home renovation project was clearly causing tension in their marriage, which several people testified to. Shanti was unhappy with how long it was taking and especially upset about the fact that she was paying for it and that she wasn't on the deed. She was also reportedly not on board with their home being featured on the zombie house flipping show. I guess David was the one who was really pushing for them to be on it to increase their home's value, but for whatever reason, Shanti was against it, which may explain why she was upset with David when they had that final meeting with Keith. The prosecution also argued that another potential contributing factor to their marriage and eventually her murder was their finances. Clearly, David was not honest with Shanti about his financial situation when they first met, and there's a good possibility that she was starting to catch on to the fact that he had been lying all this time. And even if he wasn't, the dude refused to contribute to anything, and all the burden fell on her. So yeah, she was upset. Who wouldn't be? And lastly, of course, there's the fact that David seemed to be living a double life. I did find out that they didn't bring up the whole Club Orlando situation during the trial because they couldn't ultimately prove whether or not Shanti knew about it. And I know some of her friends and family were frustrated by this. They were told that it just wasn't relevant because they couldn't prove that she even knew about it. But still, at the end of the day, we know that he was deceiving her. And it's possible that she confronted him and maybe it led to an argument that caused him to snap. Now, as for the defense, they used a strategy that I think is pretty common. In fact, it's very similar to what was used in the Maddie Kingsbury trial, which I covered recently. And that was the idea that detectives just zeroed in on David, that they had blinders on, and failed to consider other suspects. However, the defense called 0 witnesses to testify, so it doesn't sound to me like they did much to create any reasonable doubt. And the jury clearly agreed because it only took them 5 hours to come back with a guilty verdict. And God, I'm sure that was an amazing moment for her loved ones. A moment that was a long time coming. Jackson said it was the greatest moment ever, knowing that his mom could finally get the justice she deserved. And keep in mind, he was only 13 years old going through the trial. I swear, though, he has more maturity than a lot of adults. His ability to stay strong, to not give up hope is something I really admire about him. And I really loved this small detail, but one of the detectives actually gave him a coin shortly after his mom died and told him that she wouldn't stop until she got her justice. And I imagine that is where he placed a lot of his hope. He even got up there and gave a victim's impact speech, which I can't imagine how hard that must have been for him to do at that age. And while he does get very emotional during it, he really stayed strong, held his composure. It's so impressive, and I really can't explain it well enough, so I just wanted to play it for you guys today.
My mom was the best person I ever knew. She worked a lot, but she never put her family over work. Early 2018, she was taken from me and my family. It's like a hole in my heart that I can't fill or fix. She didn't die peacefully. She did not deserve anything that happened to her that night. My family and I have been waiting for about 5 years for justice. I miss her so much. I would have never thought the day before was the last time I would see my mother alive. I miss the times where we would go to Universal, or just the simple times, like walking the dogs or going to the park. She was the best mom I could ever ask for. That's it.
I also wanted to play a clip of her ex-husband Jim's statement as well. So here is that.
Your Honor, when Shanti and I were married, we tried for years to have a child with no success. It was an extremely difficult time for us. And we were about to give up when we got the wonderful news in early 2009. We did our best to raise him together, but as you know in life, it is not without its curveballs and heartaches. And when we divorced, as difficult as it was, one thing we never fought or wavered on was raising Jackson the best we could. He's tall like his dad, but he got his brains, his compassion, and his outlook on life from his mother. And her and I moved forward and continued raising a wonderful son. When this parasite came into our lives, he took something from us, and most importantly from Jackson. And what he took is not replaceable. It is something that I struggle with every day. He lost a good parent. As I struggled to understand, to this day, the only word I come back to is evil. After today, her name will be spoken every day by someone who knew her and loved her. She will be remembered and thought of every single day because of who she was and is. People will know her, will look at him and know she is inside him and smile. And because of all this, she will never be forgotten, and she will always be with us.
Lastly, Shanti's stepdad also spoke, and I wanted to play that for you as well.
This has been a long, long, long time for us to see justice done. What this has done to me personally, this was more than my stepdaughter. This was my daughter. And what I go through every day, it's hard to put into words, but yet I need to express. I suffer so much with PTSD. This has affected me so much that it withdrew me from my grandson. Because every time I thought of Shanti or my grandson, the last time I saw my daughter, we were together. So every time that I think of Jackson, it brings to my mind my daughter, and it upsets me. And all I can pray is that now that we can go forward from this day forward, and we can rebuild our relationship that we had. I suffer so bad when I was a happy-go-lucky person, laughed, joked all the time with everybody. Now, I am in constant anger. That, not really anger, but I just lash out at sometimes at anybody or everybody for no reason at all, because I am so angry and deep inside. hurt with the injustice that was done to my daughter.
So in the end, I'm so happy to tell you that David was sentenced to life in prison, which is a fraction of what this monster deserves, in my opinion. And I know I say this a lot, but for as great as these guilty verdicts and tough sentences are, it doesn't bring the victim back at the end of the day. Nothing will bring Shanti back. Jackson will have to live without his mom forever. And I'm just so glad that he has his father who is committed to keeping Shanti's memory alive. But it just doesn't take the pain of her loss away, and it never can. There has actually been an effort to get that house put into Jackson's name so that when he's older, he can decide what he wants to do with it. And I think that is really beautiful. Whether he wants to tear that house to pieces or maybe he wants to renovate it in his mother's honor, he should be the one that gets to make that choice. But God, losing Shanti is just a terrible loss. And what's so heartbreaking about it is there was just no reason for it, just pure selfishness and really just evil, in my opinion. It's such a horrible loss. It was so senseless and so unnecessary. And now so many people will have to live their lives without her forever. And it's just horrendous. I wish I had a more hopeful note to end on. I mean, obviously, I'm very happy that justice was served in this case and that he will rot until the day he dies behind bars, which is awesome. But at the end of the day, that's just the horrible reality of this case is she was murdered in a horrible way and it never should have happened. Again, I do think there is that glimmer of hope and happiness that Jackson still has his father who seems to be wonderful and very involved in his life. And I just hope they can really lean on each other as this has been horrible for both of them. But that is all I have for you guys today on this case. I definitely want to hear your thoughts below, so let me know. And yeah, I will be back next week to discuss another case. But until then, stay safe out there. Hey everyone, and happy holidays. It's Kendall.
And Josh from Mile Higher Media.
And as many of you guys know, we just recently launched our foundation, the Higher Hope Foundation. And now we are about to launch our annual matching program for the holiday season. So it's a great time to get involved, to give back, because your gift can go twice as far.
Thanks to all of your support thus far. We've already awarded several grants. We have several more in process, and we've got several exciting projects coming in 2025.
So if you are interested in getting involved and allowing us to do even more projects in the future, it is easier than ever to make a donation. You can do it right on our website, which is higherhope.org. And we've launched a new feature where you can create your own fundraiser. And you can access that by going to the Get Involved tab on our website.
So if you want your gift to be doubled right now through December 27th, Mile Higher Media will be matching all gifts.
And just as a reminder, 100% of your donations will go directly towards impacting victims of violent crime.
We just want to say a huge thank you in advance to everyone out there for all of your support, your generosity, and there's lots of other ways to help support the foundation. If you're not able to give a gift, just sharing our campaigns, the work that we're doing just helps get the word out and, you know, helps us further our mission.
Yeah, truly, because of all of your support, so many people are getting the vital services and help that they need. And we're very, very grateful for your continued support. So thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to True Crime with Kendall Rae. Thank you so much for joining me today. And if you are new, then welcome. Be sure to subscribe so that you never miss an upload from me. So guys, today I've got to just tell you, this is one of those cases that just truly makes me want to scream because of the failures that took place and led to the murder of a young woman from Australia, Celeste Mano. Now, this case absolutely needs to be talked about more. I became aware of it after her mom has been really pushing for more awareness around those failures that led to her daughter's murder. These failures that led up to Celeste's murder absolutely could have prevented this from happening. And there are also serious failures that have occurred after her death that could deter this from happening again. But action from the government just isn't being taken. Now, I've covered a few Australian cases over the years here and then also on my other podcast, Mile Higher, so I had some idea of how murder was prosecuted in Australia, but this case really opened my eyes even further about how much really needs to change and really just how broken justice systems are throughout most of the world. And that's why her family, especially her mom, is really leaning into trying to create that awareness and hopefully make some change. And they truly need as much support as possible. So I'm hoping that by sharing her story with you today, we can really show up for this family and do what we can to help them. So let's start out the way that I always do, by telling you a little bit about who Celeste Manno was. She was born on November 22nd, 1996 to her parents Aggie and Tony. And they say that from the moment she was born, she became the embodiment of light and love. From a young age, she was very, very playful, very loving. And at 4.5 years old, she became a big sister to her brother Alessandro. She also had an older half-brother, Jaden, and her family had always been one of the most important parts of her life. And if you were someone who had the pleasure of knowing Celeste while she was alive, you were one of the lucky ones. Everything I've read about her, everything I have heard said about her in interviews really makes me believe that she was a very kind, very intelligent, very loving person in all aspects of her life. From a young age, she was someone who had already developed a really strong sense of kindness, of inclusivity. Like, she was one of those kids who would take note when someone else felt left out in the group and would make the extra effort to make them feel included. And it really was her dream in life to make a difference in the lives of others. And she was planning to do so by becoming a psychologist, which was actually one of her many career aspirations. She studied criminology and psychology at the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology, and she was really fueled by her dedication towards helping others. People who knew her describe her as someone who really had a zest for life and was capable of finding joy in even the little everyday moments. And I don't think there's really any denying about how big of a loss this has been to her loved ones. And because of that, they are determined to help keep her light shining through it all. And it's really mind-blowing that 4 years after Celeste was murdered, her family is still fighting for justice in a lot of ways. So let's talk about what happened and also talk about how preventable this actually was, which is why it just I get so mad talking about cases like this, because this could have been completely avoidable. So going back to 2019, Celeste was 23 years old, just really starting out her life. And for the last 2.5 years of her life, she had been working at a call center for the company Serco Group. Her mom, Aggie, says that Celeste got a job there to get some real-world experience. And before her death, she was enrolling into her last honors year. And it was there at work that Celeste ended up meeting the man who would end up taking her life in such a brutal, horrific way, and for literally no reason. And before we get into all of that, there are two things that I want to say. One being that in this case, there has been a lot of reporting that has been inaccurate and, quite frankly, damaging. And a lot of that has had to do with the fact that it has been made to look like Celeste had some type of relationship with her killer, or even that they were acquaintances, which they really were not at all. I'll explain why that is so inaccurate here in a second. But the second thing that I wanted to say is that for a long time, and I believe even still now, most of the time, her mother refers to her killer as a beast or the beast. And I completely understand why she does that. Obviously, I need to share with you his name. And she does use his name a bit as well now too, but there's a reason why she went with the beast or beast. And the reason that she chose that term specifically is because he had actually referred to himself as a beast in one of the messages that he had sent Celeste. And it was in a much different context, but it's been kind of a way for her to take that word back and use it against him. Like I said, for the sake of you guys understanding everything that happened and knowing who was responsible for this by name, I'm going to give you his name today. And I think Celeste's family would completely understand why. However, I am going to take a page from her book and call him a beast quite a bit of the time. And not just a beast, a monster, because that is what this guy truly is. He is I don't even know if I have words for him. Nothing that I can say on YouTube. He's just beyond evil. And something is truly fucking wrong with this man. Now, this utter piece of shit, sorry excuse for a human being beast, is named Louis Seiko. And in 2019, while Celeste was working at this call center, he was working there as well. He got a job there in April of 2018, but in June of 2019, he was fired because of performance-related issues. And like I said earlier, it's not even fair to refer to the beast as an acquaintance of Celeste. He absolutely was not. And it wasn't until that day that he was fired that she really had any interaction with him. And it was because she was the team leader. And when he was fired, she was tasked with just walking him to the door of the building. And, you know, it's been actually reported in some places that she had walked him all the way to his car, which is definitely not the case. And because Celeste was a nice person, she did what any nice person would do in a situation like that. As he was, you know, being shooed out of the building, she gave him a handshake. She offered a handshake. She said, you know, good luck, something along those lines. Very, very normal, right? And this fucking weirdo reaches out and gives her a kiss on the cheek. And she was so, you know, confused why you would do something like that. It's obviously an extremely strange thing to do. She even told her mom that she was embarrassed by that. It obviously made her uncomfortable, but she thought, okay, weirdo, how'd you go? Hopefully I never see you again. And not knowing how dangerous this man was, Aggie told Celeste that maybe she was being a bit dramatic and that he probably just had a crush on her that she never knew about, which obviously now in hindsight, she sees everything completely differently. But she thought in that moment, you know, that was weird, but at least he's gone. You'll probably never see this person again. Or at least that's what she thought. But then about a week after he was fired, Celeste received the first of what would end up being 140 Instagram DMs from this beast. And in those early months, the messages were primarily love letters, saying how crazy in love he was with her, how he couldn't function without her, how he couldn't hold a job because of how much he loves her, which is obviously really disturbing, bizarre things to be sending someone who you literally do not know in any capacity. There was no relationship there whatsoever. But despite the fact that Celeste absolutely never showed any interest in him in return, never reciprocated any of his emotions, his feelings, whatever he was saying, there was no interest in him coming from her in any way. He did not stop. And she actually told him a handful of times very politely that she wasn't interested in him, that she was uncomfortable with these messages and to please just leave her alone. But he wouldn't. And here's an example of one of her messages to him. Hi, Louis. Those are really sweet words, and I appreciate you saying all of that to me. I'm a bit surprised to read this, as this is all new to me. As much as I appreciate this, I only feel in a professional way towards you, and I wish you all of the best in your new job and journey. But when that didn't deter him, and he continued to send her these creepy, disturbing messages, she decides to block him, like most people would do, right? And she thought that that would be enough for him to get the hint to leave her alone. But it didn't. In fact, every time she would block him, he would just make a new account and continue to send her the same neurotic messages. Now, unfortunately, at this point in time, and I don't know if they ever will be, a lot of these messages aren't available to the public, and I completely see why. But here is one of the messages that has been released so you can get an idea of how disturbing they really were. He says, I'm so infatuated with you, and it's now becoming unhealthy. I know my words don't help me. I'm sorry for coming on so strong, Celeste. I'm just another rival for your affection. I am truly sorry for making you feel uncomfortable. I really just wanted to speak with you, and I honestly thought you were ignoring me. My impression of you has been changed. You are no different than the majority of women. I'll remember you in this lesson for all my life, and I will devote every ounce of energy I have to climbing up and proving to the world that I'm somebody. That is my promise to you and my final contact with you. But as I'm sure you can guess, that was not his final contact with her. And I just have to point out again that these messages are even more bizarre and creepy when you think about the fact that they had zero type of friendship, relationship, acquaintanceship, anything. She literally just walked this dude to the door when he was fired. That's it. And he becomes this obsessed with her. And of course, this kind of thing does happen to women. There are men like this out there. There are people who become stalkers. And it's not just men, of course. A lot of you, I'm sure, have seen Baby Reindeer. and have heard other stories of men being stalked by women as well, but it is statistically overwhelmingly men. But yeah, that message was definitely not his final contact with her. He continues to send her DM after DM, just professing his undying love for her and obsession with her. And he's basically just doing this to a blank screen the majority of time because that's how little Celeste was engaging with it. And the few times that she did respond, she was such a kind person that she tried to set these boundaries and get him to stop in a very polite way. And Aggie, her mother, on the other hand, was so pissed off by how he was acting towards her in these messages, as any mother would be. Aggie, Celeste, and Alessandro, her brother, were all living together at this time, so she was very aware of everything that was going on with the situation, all of these messages, and she didn't think that being polite was the best way to deal with them. There were even times where she would message him in all caps, basically screaming at him to leave her daughter alone. And he wouldn't. He would not stop. And in fact, the messages became more and more deranged over time. And from July to about December, from my understanding, they were just hoping that one day he would just give up and go away. That maybe her lack of responding and constant blocking of every account he would make would just make him stop. But in December, it was clear that this guy, this beast, was never going to stop. That month, his messages went from love letters and poetry to extremely sexually explicit and almost angry and desperate. And this new, quite frankly, scary shift in his tone was really starting to worry them, and especially Aggie. Aggie felt like this was a sign that things were escalating to a dangerous level and that they need to get help involved. So Aggie convinces Celeste that they need to go and make a report on this guy. They need to get some other people involved here who can hopefully help. Hopefully being the key word here. But at first, Celeste didn't want to do it, quite frankly, and that's because she's just such a kind person. She was worried that if they escalated this further, that he would potentially hurt himself. And that just tells you everything that you need to know about the type of person that she was. That even for this person who she doesn't know, who is being so inappropriate, who's beyond creepy, scary, she is still concerned that maybe reporting this will negatively affect him. And she doesn't want anyone to feel pain or to hurt themselves. And of course, she knew how unstable he clearly was. So I can see where she was coming from with that. That's not to say that if you were in that situation, you should think like that. Protecting yourself is always the number one priority. And when someone has crossed a line like that and you feel like you are in danger, it is always good to go and make that report. But here she was, a victim of clear harassment, and she was worried about how reporting him would affect him. It makes me so sad thinking about what a kind soul she truly was to have thoughts like that. And of course, she had no idea what this man was capable of, truly. But the fact of the matter was, he was crossing lines here. He was making her feel uncomfortable in a big way, and it needed to stop. So about 6 months after it all started, she and her mom went to the police, which leads me to the first of many failures. And that's why I feel conflicted telling people, you know, if you're in this situation, go and report it. And I stand by that. I think you should. But it's frustrating that many people who do try and report things or go get help don't end up getting that help. But the two of them end up going to the police. They went to the Mernda police station and they were told by an officer to just ignore him. That's right. That's all they had to say. Just ignore him. Which obviously that is what Celeste had already been doing. And she's taking it a step further than that. She's blocking him, and he continues to make these accounts and continues to message her anyway. And when they tried to explain that, they were told, well, that's really just the nature of social media, and if you don't like it, then you just shouldn't be on it. Yep, that's really what they told them. And it's ridiculous because that is not the nature of social media. Yes, those things happen on social media, but that's not how it should be. That's not how it should be handled if it happens. And it should not be accepted as the norm. And whoever that person was that told them that, I really, really hope that they were reprimanded in some way or at least got some type of training for moving forward. But I couldn't find anything that said that, and I honestly doubt that they were. And what's even crazier is that at no point during this interaction with the officer did they ever even write down Louay's name or do anything to show that they wanted to help? Celeste and Aggie were even told that since no crime was committed, nothing could be done. But a crime was committed, and I'm not talking about her murder. I'm talking about harassment on social media. Online harassment is a crime in Australia, but clearly not a crime that the government cares enough about to protect people against it. And we haven't even yet really gotten into the true stalking element of all of this. And it turns out that this monster full on stalked Celeste. And because that officer refused to help her, refused to recognize the seriousness of the situation and the threat that Louay posed, the next 6 months were filled with more of the same. This beast would legit park outside of her work and wait for her, and it got so bad that her job had to implement a system where people would walk to her car with her. And here's law enforcement telling her that a crime hasn't been committed. Outrageous. By the time July of 2020 rolled around, enough was enough. Louay was clearly not going to stop, and it was impacting every facet of Celeste's life, and she was truly living in fear. There was one new positive thing in her life at this point, and that was a new boyfriend, a wonderful man named Chris, who she had met through work and was really starting to build a great relationship with. They had actually been friends for a long time, and she wasn't always sure if she wanted a relationship with him or not, but not long before her murder, they did begin dating. And he was really good to her throughout all of this, but there was no denying that the situation with the beast was beyond hard on her. No matter how much support that she had from loved ones, it was clear that legal action needed to be taken. So on July 1st, her and her mom went back to the police station and laid it all out on the table. They explained everything. They pulled up the messages. They made sure that a proper report was filed. And thankfully, this time it was. And it even went a step further than that. On July 3rd, Celeste and Aggie went to the Heidelberg Magistrates Court, and they were granted an interim personal safety intervention order, also known as a PSIO. And a PSIO seeks to protect a person from physical or mental harm caused by an individual who is not a family member. Now, when one of these are granted, the person who is served the order has rules or conditions that they need to follow, and a breach of these rules is a breach of the law. So Louay was served the order on July 8th, and he was instructed that he could not have any contact with Celeste whatsoever. And at first, this worked, at least for a little while, to be honest, very short while. From about July through mid-August, everything just appeared to stop. And during that time, Celeste and her mom sought out for the interim order to be made final. And after Louay refused to consent to the final orders, a hearing was scheduled for March 9th of 2021. And also during that time, he was interviewed at the Craigieburn police station, where he admitted to sending the repeated messages from various social media accounts. But of course, he said that he wasn't at fault. And this is maddening and completely ridiculous. But he said that if his messages were causing her distress, that she could just stop reading them, and that sending them was, quote, therapeutic for him. He also said that because Celeste filed an intervention order, he was no longer interested in her, basically alluding to the idea that he was over her and was not going to send her any further messages. But this statement was bullshit, because he definitely was still interested in her and was not going to stop. And on August 15th, he breached the order and he sent her an Instagram DM that had a link to a Google Doc attached. And it turns out it was a 3.5-page letter. And Celeste actually wasn't sure at first if the message was from him, and she didn't want to open the link thinking it may contain a virus or something like that. So after work that day, she ended up just bringing her phone to the police station so that they could open it. And that's when they realized that it was in fact from him, which meant that he breached the order. And what's interesting about this letter is that when Celeste read it, she actually felt bad for him, and so did her mom. Now, I don't actually have the full letter to read to you all, but to give you an idea, it was basically a plea to have her drop the intervention order, that it was ruining his life. And according to her mom, he actually used the word please in the letter 43 times.
Please see reason, Celeste. Please. Celeste, the ball is in your court. Only you can end this now, Celeste. Please end this nonsense by withdrawing the order and stopping the charges against me for stalking and harassment. And if you make the right choice, Celeste, both of us can move on and we can finally have peace of mind.
He also said that because of the order, he's facing 10 years and that he's not going to be able to look after his sick mother. Just a bunch of things to make it seem like she was ruining his life, basically over some harmless DMs, which obviously they were not harmless at all. Celeste did absolutely nothing wrong by filing the intervention order. In fact, she did the right thing on all counts. But, she had this side of her that was truly caring for all people, and she felt bad, and so did her mom. But at first, when they read this letter, they both had this moment of, did we do the wrong thing here? Aggie even ended up calling the officer that they reported him to and asked about, what would dropping the order be like? What options do they have? And when they did that, they said if they dropped it, there's nothing that they could do to protect Celeste. And that was the moment Aggie said it really hit her. She knew her daughter needed that protection, and she was not going to stand in the way of that. Plus, a lot of red flags became clear. She realized that more than anything else, this letter was a threat of what Louis would do if Celeste didn't drop it. So she didn't drop it, which was absolutely the right move, but it's also another instance of how Celeste was failed. Because even when this beast reached that order, they did nothing to protect her. That letter in itself was a breach of the order, and it proved that he was still an active threat towards her, and yet nothing was done about it. There were no legitimate consequences for him to face, and he was just able to go about his normal life. But in an interview after the breach, he did say that he'd stop reaching out to her, and technically speaking, he did. After the letter was sent, the messages stopped, and for a few brief weeks, they thought maybe this time Celeste was safe, but she wasn't safe. And because they did nothing to stop him, on November 16th, 2020, her life was stolen from her in an unbelievably brutal way. And to describe what happened, I need to go back to just before her murder. As I mentioned earlier, Celeste had this new boyfriend named Chris. And aside from everything else that was going on in her life, everything with him was going very well, and the two of them were really happy. And right before she was murdered, the two of them went out on a date. And while they were on this date, they took a photo together. And if you're watching this episode, the photo is on the screen right now. And Celeste really liked this picture. She liked it so much that she wanted to share it on social media. And on the night of November 15th, she did. But when she did that, she unknowingly and absolutely at no fault of her own triggered Louis. And just hours later, shortly after 3:50 a.m., he scaled the fence to her backyard and used a hammer to shatter her bedroom window. After that, he entered her bedroom and he proceeded to stab Celeste 23 times as she laid in bed asleep, with the fatal blow being a stab wound to her heart. CCTV footage from a neighbor's house determined that from the time he left his car to the time he returned, he was gone for only 2 minutes and 39 seconds. That's how quickly this happened. And in those 2 minutes and 39 seconds, he managed to take away the life of a beautiful young woman whose life was only just beginning. And watching interview clips of her poor mother describing what this night was like is beyond devastating. It's just horrific. For her to even have the strength to talk about what that night was like, it's just amazing to me. She was there the night that it happened. She heard it happen. She was sleeping and she heard the glass shatter. She said it sounded incredibly loud. And at first she was really confused. She thought maybe she was having a horrible nightmare. Obviously, when you get woken up by a loud sound like that, it's very disorienting. But when she heard Celeste gasp out, she knew that this was real. She ran right into her room, right over the broken glass. She's screaming, saying, "Celeste, don't leave me." She did what every mother would do in that situation and tried her best to, perform CPR, hoping that that would be enough to save her life. Obviously, in a situation like that, most of the time you're in sort of a haze, like you can't fully comprehend what is happening. She was very confused. She didn't even realize that this was a murder at first. She was trying to make sense of the whole situation, but after first responders got there, they told her, "Stop, this is a crime scene. We just found a knife." And it was in that moment that she realized exactly what happened and exactly who did this.
It was like something I'd just never heard. It was like a million pieces of glass just crashing. And all of a sudden I heard, oh, so I remember just going, Celeste, and I just ran out of bed and I'm just screaming her name down the hallway. I go, Celeste, sweetie, what happened? And I realise that I'm running all over glass. I'm seeing blood. I still don't get it. And I'm pulling her out of the bed. She's not helping me at all. But I see all that glass. And so I thought I didn't want to drop her and all that.
Outside, security footage shows Seiko fleeing in his car. As the paramedics arrive, inside, Aggie is desperately fighting to save her daughter's life.
Breathe, sweetie, please don't leave me, don't leave me. And then one of them stops me and he says, this is a crime scene. We found a knife. And in that moment, all I said was, what? Oh my God, he killed her. He said, you know who did this? I said, yeah. Yes. Yes.
And when I heard what happened next, I was actually quite surprised, and I think a lot of you will be too, since up until this point, this didn't seem like something Louis would do, but rather than hide or wait for authorities to come and find him, he ended up just turning himself in. At 3:57 a.m., he just shows up at the Mernda police station and asked an officer to shoot him, and then proceeded to explain what he had done. Meanwhile, back at the house, the scene was being processed, and officers not only found the knife that he had left behind, but they also found the hammer that he had used to break the window. Plus, a little bit down the road, they ended up finding a phone that he clearly tried to ditch. And there just really aren't words to properly describe the pain that her family felt, both on that day and every day since. I actually listened to a podcast that her brother and her mom did, and it really just broke my heart. It is so devastating to listen to their experience and the toll that this has taken on their lives, just through the entire experience from the day that those messages started to today. I want to link that episode below if you would like to hear more directly from them. I definitely recommend giving it a listen and showing them that support. Aggie also talked about how a lot of the reporting on her daughter's case has been really frustrating, and how they've left Alessandro completely out of the reporting at all. They've failed to mention how horrible it's been for him and how close the two of them actually were. Listening to him describe the ways that this has broken his mother and also himself is so devastating. And one thing that he opened up about is how hard it's been for him to show emotion. I mean, everyone deals with grief differently, and he feels like he is just completely numb at this point. He's only been able to cry a few times, and he said that that's been really hard, especially when others around him are able to show that emotion more easily. And obviously, it's not because he doesn't have the emotion. It's just, yeah, it's that numbness that some people go through. He works in the wedding industry, and he says that the times he has felt the most emotional is during the father-daughter dances. Just seeing that and knowing that his big sister won't have it, those are the moments where he finds himself really hurting the most. He also said that Celeste's death has completely changed their whole family dynamic. They don't go out to celebrate holidays or milestones like they used to. His mother is just completely a different human now, understandably, and really no one in their family has been the same since. Aggie mentioned that she feels guilt on a daily basis. She even feels guilty doing something as small as going out to dinner. What's heart-wrenching is how much Aggie actually blames herself for all of this. She has said that she feels responsible for not protecting her daughter, and there were times where she wished that she was killed that night too. And that pain, I know I can't say anything to take it away, and as a mother, I understand exactly what she's saying. Like, I would probably feel the same way, and there's nothing that I can say to you, Aggie, if you ever listen to this episode or see this, that will make you feel any better or change any of that emotion for you. But I hope someday you're able to realize that this was not your fault. This was not Celeste's fault. This was no one's fault. The only person who has any blame or fault in this is Louis, is the beast. Actually, I take that back. The only other people that have blame and fault in this is the government. who completely failed your family and failed to protect your daughter. And with that being said, let's get into all of that. Let's get into the aftermath of it all. Because if the circumstances weren't already horrible enough with everything leading up to her death, the legal response makes it all 10 times worse. So even though the Beast literally confessed, he says it wasn't actually him, or basically that he wasn't in his right mind when he did it. In police interviews and in psychiatric evaluations following his arrest, this sicko said that it was the voices in his head that told him to do it. He said that it was the voice of a woman who he called Isha, and that she told him to murder Celeste. And based on that, I'm sure it will come as no surprise to you that Louis tried to claim that he was mentally impaired at the time of the murder. And he has used that defense the last few years to try and minimize his responsibility and culpability. And he even tried to blame law enforcement for what he did, which, I mean, I blame them too, but not in the way that he was. And his whole mental impairment defense has only caused Celeste's family to endure more pain than they already have, especially because of how much he has dragged things on. However, from the moment her daughter was murdered, Aggie promised her that she wouldn't stop until she got justice. And even with the years worth of roadblocks, she has never given up. I have so much respect for her as a mother and everything that she has done, the fight that she has been able to fight under the pain and grief that she is going through at the same time. Celeste was laid to rest at the end of November, just after what would have been her 24th birthday. So young. And really, it's been an uphill battle for their family ever since. From the end of 2020 through 2023, there were countless hearings and psychiatric evaluations to determine Louis's ability to stand trial, and if there would even be a trial, and what the nature of his mental impairment truly is. And despite some initial conflicting opinions, it was ultimately determined that he was mentally fit to stand trial. So trial was scheduled for May of 2023, and a month before it began, he changed his plea from not guilty to guilty, and that meant he would no longer need to go to trial. Instead, there would just be a hearing in front of the judge to determine the length of his sentence. But let me tell you, nothing about the lead up to this was straightforward either. In the summer of 2023, the hearing was delayed after he fired his attorney because he said he felt pressured to plead guilty, and that he said he wanted to revoke that plea. He also said that he wanted to represent himself in court, but ended up being convinced to keep his guilty plea and to get new representation. However, they still had to delay the hearing because his new attorney, Tim Marsh, said that he needed more time to be briefed on the case. There were a few more delays after that, but ultimately his hearing was scheduled to begin on January 29th, 2024. And guess what this bozo did right before? Once again, he said that he wanted to represent himself. Louis said that he wanted to dispute the autopsy because, get this, he doesn't believe he actually stabbed Celeste 23 times. He said that he only stabbed her 2 times, and the other 21 injuries were caused by the broken glass, which, may I remind you, he broke the glass. So even if that were true, which it's been proven that it's not, it still would have been his fault. And I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. I will be talking about that more later on, but let's get into what happened during this hearing. So like I said, it started on January 29th, 2024, and it ended up going on for 3 days. And just as a reminder, they are not trying to prove whether or not he did it. It's been determined that he did. What they were arguing is how much time he should end up serving in prison. Now, for the prosecution, they were seeking a sentence of life in prison. They believe that he not only meticulously planned Celeste's murder, but that he feels no remorse for what he's done, and it's quite possible that he would do it again if given the opportunity. Now, as for the defense, they relied heavily on his mental impairment to remove as much culpability as possible, seeking a much lighter sentence. And that's what I want to get into next, Louis's mental impairment, because that is a huge part of this case. Over the years, he'd undergone several evaluations where he was unable to convince psychiatrists that he was experiencing psychosis when the murder occurred. And 3 different professionals said that it was their opinion that he was faking his symptoms during his assessments. However, he was determined to have a severe personality disorder, as well as major depressive disorder and body dysmorphic disorder. And to be clear, the prosecution wasn't denying this. However, they were rejecting the idea that his diagnoses made him any less responsible for what he had done. If anything, they believe that he is more at risk of doing something like this again if he was given the chance. And that's exactly what one forensic psychiatrist testified to. Dr. Darji played a big role in a lot of this, and he basically said that yes, Loue was mentally impaired at the time of the murder, and it did impact his judgment, but that these conditions didn't force him to kill Celeste. He also came to the conclusion that his risk of reoffending was extremely high. In fact, he said that he felt it was a possibility that when he was in prison, if any female guard was kind to him in any way, there's a good chance that he would continue this stalking behavior or do something harmful against her. And during this hearing, there was a lot of back and forth about his risk to the public and his ability to be rehabilitated in prison, because obviously, if he can't be rehabilitated and he's deemed a risk to the public, he shouldn't be let out, right? And the prosecution kept driving that point over and over again, that they do not feel this person is capable of getting better. And of course, they also made the point that this wasn't just some spur-of-the-moment attack. For over a year, Loue harassed and stalked Celeste, and months before her murder, he began plotting her death. This beast literally admitted to the police that he used the internet to find her address and then looked up the floor plan of her house to figure out which room was hers. And if those aren't the actions of a carefully thought out killer and a premeditated murder, I don't know what is. Not to mention the fact that he bought the knife that was used to kill her months before he actually did. And it's believed that the real trigger, the reason he did what he did when he did it, goes back to that photo that I showed you earlier. The one of Celeste and her boyfriend the night that she posted online the night before she died. And I know I've already said this, but I want to make this point once again and make it so clear that it is not her fault that she posted this photo and it led to him finally losing it and taking her life. And I want to make that point so clear because her mom has been very vocal about how she feels the media that has covered the case has sort of put a lot of blame on Celeste for that photo, that there's a lot of victim blaming going on. And if you want to hear just how inhumane and nasty and, in my opinion, pure evil this man actually is, listen to this. During the hearing, he decided he needed to cross-examine the medical examiner because, like I said before, he questioned the autopsy and the amount of stab wounds that Celeste actually received. So this sicko starts asking about every single stab wound, asking for the details of every single stab wound while their family, her loved ones, are sitting there listening to it. And at some point they decide, this is too painful, this is so traumatizing, we don't need to listen to this shit. So they get up and they leave the courtroom. And after they do, just minutes after they do, someone comes out and told them that he's done. He no longer has any further questioning. So it's very obvious that the only reason he was doing all of that was to make them sit there and listen in agony to the agony that Celeste experienced at his hands. He just wanted to torture them. And when they were no longer in the room to torture anymore, he gave up his cross-examination. And the hell that this family went through doesn't stop there. The only time during this process that they were able to confront him in any way, to say what they wanted to say to the man who stole Celeste from them, they were given the opportunity to give victim impact statements. And they were shocked to hear this, and they talk a lot about this in the podcast I mentioned that I'm going to link below. But they essentially told them that they really couldn't say anything they wanted to say. They had written their statements back in December, and then they had to submit them to make sure that they had followed the guidelines of what they could and could not say. And what was infuriating and shocking to me is they were given the statements back 30 minutes before they were allowed to read them, only to find out that about half of what they had written down had been crossed out and they were told they couldn't say it. Aggie said she had written 12 pages and 6 of those pages were blocked out. And it wasn't just like 6 pages in a row, it was paragraphs at a time throughout. So with only 30 minutes of time, everyone who had written victim impact statements had to piece their words together and try to make it make sense and also make the impact that they wanted. And then when Aggie did end up reading her statement, which was a fraction of what she wanted to say, Loue, being the little bitch that he is, couldn't even look her in the eye. And so she screamed at him and said, "Look at me." She also said, God, this part broke my heart. She said, "I hate you, and the only person I hate more than you is me. I couldn't protect her from you." Her brother Alessandro says that he didn't even want to read his statement at all because he couldn't say how he truly felt. But he did decide to read his statement, and when he did, he went off script and said things that he wasn't supposed to, and the judge got really pissed. So not only did Celeste lose her voice, but they did too. And to add insult to injury, the judge's final ruling is appalling. In the end, Judge Jane Dixon sentenced Louise Seiko to a mere 36 years in prison with a parole eligibility in 30 years. Yes, you heard that right. 36 years with parole on the table, 30 years from then. There aren't even words to describe how insane that is. It goes without saying, I think everyone out there will agree with me. If you don't, I don't know why you wouldn't, but I think we can all agree here that that sentence isn't remotely enough. It's offensive. It's dangerous. Not only is it dangerous to the public, to their family, and just a slap in the face, really, to Celeste and the whole family, but it was a missed opportunity to set a precedent in cases like this moving forward. But for whatever reason, the decision was made to go easy on Celeste's killer. And I cannot wrap my head around this. I cannot understand why this was what the judge felt was best. And if it couldn't get any worse, it actually does, because they found out that if Louise had made the decision to go to trial, roll the dice, this judge said that she would have only given him 40 years, meaning she was never, ever even considering a life sentence for him in the first place. In a statement given after all of this, Aggie said that it was unbelievable that the court showed him mercy, even though he showed Celeste none.
Celeste Mano's mother thought her wait for justice was over, but the sentence has already sparked another battle for an appeal.
Today's outcome proves just how flawed the justice system is. It failed Celeste then, and it failed her again now.
Her daughter's killer, Louise Seiko, sentenced to 36 years behind bars.
I consider that your offending does not warrant life imprisonment, although it does warrant a very stern sentence.
Clearly, I'm devastated. We all are. Absolutely unbelievable that the court decided to grant him mercy, even though he showed Celeste none.
And this decision is just further proof of how flawed their justice system truly is. They allowed this dangerous man to continue to stalk Celeste, and then they did nothing when his intervention order was breached. And that is a huge reason why Aggie, Alessandro, and the rest of their family is calling for stronger protections and stricter laws against stalking and punishments for criminals who breach these orders. One thing that she is specifically calling for is the use of ankle bracelets, which you think would just be the standard. Apparently it's not. She believes that if her daughter's killer had been wearing an ankle bracelet, it would have given them notice when he approached their home. And if that would have been the case, they could have gotten away and Celeste would still be here. And her efforts and strength in all of this has truly been incredible, and even led to a 200+ page report that was conducted by the Victorian Law Reform Commission. The report addresses gaps in the legal system's response to stalking and puts forward 46 recommendations with the goal of improving protections and support for victims like Celeste. Some of these recommendations include improving legal aid and support mechanisms for victims, as well as dedicated training for law enforcement. It also recommends revising personal safety prevention orders like the one that Celeste had to better prioritize cases outside of family violence. Obviously, I don't have time to go through them all, so of course I will link the report in the description of this episode or in the show notes if you are listening to the podcast version. And here's the thing, this report was fantastic. It brought up so many great recommendations. And how many of those recommendations do you think have been implemented? 0. It is atrocious. It is disgusting. It is shameful that in the years since her murder, nothing, not one thing has been done to prevent this from happening to someone else. Aggie, Alessandro, Tony, and the rest of their family have marched the streets with thousands of fellow Australians begging for some kind of change and tougher laws on gender-based violence. And they and so many others have been met with silence. Meetings they were promised have been ignored, phone calls have gone unanswered, and enough is enough. Action needs to be taken, and it needs to happen now. So in the description or show notes of this episode, I'm going to leave the email of the Attorney General of Victoria. Her name is Jacqueline Symes, and I ask that you take a couple minutes to email her and demand the immediate implementation of these recommendations. I'll make it easy for you. I'll have a written example that you're free to change up however you want, or just write your own. And that'll all be below. And I'm sure a lot of you will ask, because I know the majority of my audience is in the United States, but it doesn't matter where you live. We can all demand action, and for Celeste's sake and the future safety of other people, we need to. And something else that Aggie is really pushing for is the mandatory sentence of life in prison for all murders. She believes that the only way to deter people from murdering is giving them the most severe sentence. And anything less than that is simply not enough. She believes that Celeste killer will absolutely do it again if released. And I agree with her. I think there's a huge possibility that if and when, he's going to be let out, I think he will do something like this again. And that's terrifying. They tried to appeal his sentence, but the Office of Public Prosecution said that they wouldn't go to the Court of Appeals to challenge the 36-year sentence. I guess they had just lost the appeal in a different case, and they think that the outcome would probably be the same if they tried to appeal on this case, so they aren't even going to try. So yeah, I can see why Aggie is as outraged as she is, and I am right there with her. The system failed her daughter. It has failed so many people all over the world, so many different systems, and it's continuing to fail her and others every single day. Now, like I said, I know I have a largely US-based audience, but there is a petition on change.org that anyone can sign regardless of where you live. And signing the Justice for Celeste petition is a free and easy way that you can show this family your support. And I'm going to ask that you please take the time to sign it. It only takes a couple of seconds. There's also a Facebook page that I'm going to link in the description. And if anyone in my audience lives in Victoria or anywhere near Australia, I want to encourage you to follow that page. But even if you are anywhere else, just the support that families can get in those numbers, or even just sending a nice comment message, whatever it is, goes a long way. But there are a lot of posts on there about their rallies and events that they hold. And if you are able to go to any of those, I highly encourage you to go out and support this family. There have already been a number of rallies put on with the goal of raising awareness and getting the attention of the government. And right now they need as much support as they can get. In March of this year, friends, family, and supporters marched through central Melbourne down to the Supreme Court in an effort to raise awareness and demand change. And I can tell you that this is a group who is not going to back down. And obviously, this episode just really scratches the surface. There is so much change that needs to happen to protect victims of stalking, and Aggie is really leading that fight in Australia. I was really moved by how much passion she has for change and how much commitment she has, how much strength after everything that she has been through to change the system to help other people. It truly takes people like Aggie to get things done. And I'm so proud of her. And I hope one day, I don't know if it's even possible, and I would never expect this for you, but I hope for you that some way you're able to find peace and to know that this was not your fault in any way. The fact that Louay could have been stopped and wasn't is just such a massive failure. There's honestly no words to put to it, just how atrocious it really is. And 36 years in prison. What a fucking joke. This case has truly infuriated me, and I hope you guys feel the same, and I hope that leads you to taking some action, whether that's following their page, signing that petition, sending that email, whatever you can do, please take the time to do it. And thank you to all of you who have listened to this episode, listened to Celeste's story, and I hope it enrages you as much as it enraged me. But that is all I have for you guys this week. I will be back next week to discuss another case. And until then, stay safe out there. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to True Crime with Kendall Rae. Thank you so much for joining me today. And if you are new, then welcome. I'm happy to have you. And make sure to click subscribe so that you never miss an upload from me. So, guys, today we're going to be talking about a case that has been in the news a lot recently. So many of you may have heard of it. Trial just wrapped up when I am recording this episode. So I'm very eager to let you know what happened. We're going to be talking about Madeline Kingsbury, an amazing woman. And we're going to be talking about Adam Fravel, in my opinion, one of the biggest losers on the face of the planet. Madeline, or Maddie, as she was referred to by most of her friends and family, was an amazing young woman, an amazing young mother who was doing big things with her life and really carrying the weight for the family when Adam really, in my opinion, and just by fact, wasn't really doing shit. This case happened fairly recently, and at first Maddie was a missing person, but eventually they did locate her remains. And like I said, this is going to be a deep dive, so we're going to be going over a lot. So I want to just jump in, and I want to start out by telling you about what an incredible person Maddie was. So Madeline Jane Kingsbury was born on June 1st, 1996 in Winona, Minnesota, to her parents David and Krista. And she was the baby of her family. She had two siblings, Megan and Stephen. I had personally never heard of Winona, Minnesota, and from what I have seen, it is a very beautiful place. And from what I can tell after doing research for this episode, it seems like a wonderful community. And it's actually where Winona Ryder is from, which I thought was a cool little fact there. Now, when I look into a victim's life, sometimes it's difficult to find information about them. And you guys know I like to find as much as I can and tell you about who they were as a person when they were alive as possible, because I think that is just as important as the information regarding their murder. And when researching this case, I actually was able to find quite a bit of information about Maddie, and I found some beautiful words that were written about her that I want to share with you now. From an early age, it was obvious that she was special. By the time that she was 2, she was stringing large sentences and complex thoughts together. People would take notice and couldn't help but ask with exclamation, "How old is she?" She could definitely talk and talk and talk, carrying on conversations for hours. When she was young, she'd follow you around the house, chattering away. Actually, she's always done that, not just when she was little. As many of you also know, she also loved to sing and did so beautifully. Mommy, daughter, sister, aunt, niece, cousin, friend, colleague, and co-conspirator. She was many things to many people. Big smile and big heart. That's Madeline. And the more I dug into who Maddie really was, the more impressed I became. She graduated from Farmington High School and went on to attend Winona State University, where she was an incredibly well-liked person and an outstanding student. Loved ones described her as kind, caring, a little bit quirky, and a loyal friend with a great sense of humor. She was one of those people who was naturally very warm to others and really approached life with a positive attitude. And above all else, it really seems that Maddie was known for her love of family, and not just the family that she was born into, but the family that she grew into. Maddie's parents actually didn't stay together and ended up recoupling, and she grew to love the new additions to her family, including her step-parents as well as her step-siblings. And then while she was still in college, Maddie actually started a family of her own. At Winona State University, she ended up meeting a guy named Adam Fravel, and the two of them got pregnant with their first child, a daughter. They never actually got married, but the two of them decided to be together and to raise their baby girl. Adam even ended up dropping out of school so that he could get a job and support their family while Maddie finished her degree. And to be honest, from what I was able to gather, in the beginning, their relationship was actually pretty decent. Maddie's family felt that Adam really loved her and that he was, taking all the right steps to try and be a good family man. But that all seemed to change after they had their second child, a boy. And that's when her family said things just kind of derailed from there. Adam lost his job in the pandemic, and he quickly became financially dependent on Maddie, who, by the way, was taking on almost all of the responsibilities of parenting while working full time and while in school to get her master's degree. In 2023, Maddie was a student at the University of Minnesota in an advanced master's program while also working as a clinical research coordinator at the prestigious Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. And I think we can all agree that juggling all of that while still parenting and being the main parent is extremely impressive. I mean, her kids were 5 and 2 years old at the time, and she managed to be this totally hands-on parent while also making sure to pursue her education and to pursue her dreams. But Adam, on the other hand, like I said, big loser energy, because despite not having a job himself, he seemed to take a more hands-off approach to parenting. He was studying to get his pilot's license, but comparatively speaking, Maddie just had a lot more on her plate and is said to have been far more involved with the kids on top of that. And her loved ones say that she often confided in them about how the responsibilities often fell on her for everything. And she actually confided in them about many things that are much worse than that, but we will get to that later. But first, I really want to stress how loved she was, how hardworking she was, and despite the fact that her life was cut short, how big of an impact she made on everyone that she met. Maddie was said to be someone who never stopped laughing and also loved to make other people laugh. She would make places and people feel better than when she found them. She was truly an incredible role model to both of her kids, and she is deeply missed by her friends and family every single day. Which brings me to March 31st, 2023, the last day that anyone heard from her. Now, that day was a Friday, and it was a totally typical day. Maddie and Adam took the kids to daycare around 8 a.m., and surveillance footage shows the two of them walking in with the kids for a drop-off. And then after dropping the kids off, we believe that Maddie's plan was to go home and then drive into the Mayo Clinic because Fridays were typically the day that she was in office. However, after 8:15 a.m., when she sent her sister Megan a final text message laughing about a photo from the night before, Maddie was never heard from again. And by that evening, Maddie's mom became increasingly concerned because it just wasn't like her daughter to not respond to her texts or calls all day. So Krista at that point ends up reaching out to Megan to see if maybe she had heard from her, and she hadn't. So in true big sister fashion, she goes ahead and sends Maddie a text saying, "Hey, mom is trying to reach you. Can you give her a call back?" And when that goes unanswered, Megan started to realize that her mom was right. So she decides to reach out to Adam, thinking that if anyone had heard from her, it'd probably be him, right? But apparently he also hadn't heard from Maddie since that morning. And he even said that Maddie didn't pick up the kids from daycare that day like they had planned. So he said that he just ended up getting the kids and taking them to his parents' house in Mabel, Minnesota, which is about an hour south. Megan then reached out to Maddie's best friend, Katie, hoping that maybe she could help. Maybe she knew where she was. And since Megan didn't live in Winona, she asked Katie if she wouldn't mind, running over there and see if Maddie was at the house. And she did. And despite her blue minivan being parked in the driveway, when she knocked on the door, nobody answered. And at that point, they realized they needed to get police involved. So at 8:20 p.m., Katie ended up calling the Winona Police Department saying that she was worried about Maddie and she wanted someone to come by and perform a wellness check. And she also shared that Maddie had been recently having issues with Adam, the father of her 2 children. And like I mentioned, a lot of the focus in today's episode will be on those issues, but for now, let's just keep going through the timeline. So an officer ends up meeting up with Katie at Maddie's house and essentially came to the same conclusion that she did, which was that Maddie's car was there, but there didn't appear to be any sign of Maddie herself, even after knocking on the door and peering through the windows. An officer also ended up speaking on the phone that night with her dad, and he confirmed that this behavior was super uncharacteristic of her. They even spoke on the phone with Adam, who seemed to confirm that nobody had heard from her all day. And he also told the officer that she hadn't responded to any of his texts that day and that she failed to pick up the kids from daycare. And then once again, he explained what I explained to you earlier to the officers, that he just went ahead and picked up the kids from daycare and then brought them over to his parents' house. Now, it's been reported that they weren't able to file a missing persons report just yet since it hadn't been 24 hours, which of course we all know is total bullshit. Never let law enforcement tell you that. It's so frustrating that this still happens. I will never understand. But anyway, on the following day, on April 1st, the report was filed and the Winona PD jumped right into action. On the morning of April 1st, 2023, Krista and Megan went to the police station to file the report, and they provided a lot more context to the situation. Context that made Maddie's lack of communication a lot more suspicious. They informed officers that Maddie and Adam were actually in the process of splitting up, and the week prior, she told them that her plans had changed because I guess initially she had told Adam that she was going to find an apartment close to where Adam's parents lived because Adam was planning on moving in with them because of his financial difficulties. And at first her plan was to live somewhere nearby for the sake of their kids, but a week prior to her going missing, she let him know that she had changed her mind and she was actually going to stay in Winona. And that was partially because she didn't want the kids to have to change daycare. She didn't want to, mess up their routine. But it was also because she just loved Winona. And another reason, I'm guessing, is because she had just started a new relationship. Now, I want to be clear because Adam's family has tried to spin it differently. There was no cheating going on at all. Maddie and Adam had been broken up for a while. And even though Maddie and Adam were still living together, which many people, even though they're in the process of a breakup, still live together, especially when there are kids involved, right? And during that time, while they were broken up and still living together, she reconnected with someone from college, a guy named Spencer, and Maddie was really happy. And so was he. But anyways, Megan and Krista were very honest with officers about all of this and the fact that she had moved on and about the fact that Adam was emotionally abusive and controlling of Maddie. Adam allegedly wouldn't let her talk to Spencer when he was around, and he made her show him all of their text messages. But that actually wasn't the worst of it. Officers learned that once Adam had pinned Maddie down, put his hands around her throat, and told her that if she didn't listen up, she was going to end up like Gabby Petito. Now, that's one thing you got to know about Adam Fravel is he had a weird obsession, I would say, with the Gabby Petito case. And I will be getting more into that later on. And another thing they learned was that Maddie had plans that day, April 1st, to go visit her sister. She and her daughter were going to go see Megan. And Maddie was not someone who just canceled plans, especially without saying anything. And so that fact immediately led her loved ones to believe that her disappearance was not voluntary. So later that day, a search warrant was executed on Maddie and Adam's house. But despite being cluttered and a bit messy, there was no sign of a struggle. However, there were a few important discoveries that were made. Some of these discoveries had immediate significance. Some of them, took a while to actually connect to her disappearance. For now, and we'll go over the rest later, I want to go over what actually did have immediate significance. First of all, they found Maddie's cell phone, her purse, and her jacket, which she was seen wearing the morning before when she dropped the kids off at daycare. And they also found her laptop, which she used to work from home. And I think we can all agree that all of these are things that you would not expect to find if someone had just left voluntarily. So of course, these items were then collected. And while investigators worked on getting a warrant to extract the data from her phone and her laptop, Adam was spoken to yet again. On April 1st and April 2nd, Adam was spoken to by investigators. And they had first spoken to him at his parents' house, and then the second time they spoke to him was at the Rushford Police Department. That first conversation that they had with Adam at his parents' house was definitely more on the casual side. However, the second conversation they had with him at the police department was anything but casual. And now I want to share with you Adam's version of what happened on March 31st. Keep in mind, this is his version of the story. So he said that day, after dropping the kids off at daycare around 8 a.m., that he and Maddie drove back home. When they got home, Maddie went downstairs to take a meeting, and then after that, she was planning on driving into work, which he says was the last time he saw her. And as for his day, Adam explained that because their relationship was ending, he had been putting a ton of his stuff into boxes. Some of these boxes full of his belongings he was planning to bring to his parents' house, and then some of the boxes he was planning to bring to a storage unit. So after Maddie went downstairs to work, Adam says that he went to the gas station to fill up her minivan, and then went back home to load up his boxes. He said that he was borrowing her car for the day to drive all of those boxes to his parents' house, and that he had left her his car so that she could drive to work. He then goes on to explain the route that he drove, which was south on Highway 43 towards Mabel, which is important to remember, okay? South on 43 towards Mabel. The thing is, though, Adam claims that when he got to the town of Choice, Minnesota, about 45 minutes into his 1-hour drive, he said he realized that he had accidentally put the boxes that were meant for the storage unit into the car. So at that point, he turns around and starts driving back to Winona. And it's also really important to note that he said he didn't make any stops during this trip, okay? So then when he arrives back at home around 12 p.m., he sees that his car is still in the driveway. So he assumed that Maddie had, carpooled with someone into work. And he actually texted her a few times that morning, one of which was when he came home and saw that his car was still there. And then he says that he went back inside and Maddie wasn't home, although he claims he wasn't worried because he thought she was just at work. He said the only time he became concerned was when she didn't pick up the kids from daycare. And so he went and got them and then, like I've been over, went to his parents' house. And that pretty much sums up what Adam said happened that day. But this is not where his conversation with investigators ended. Oh no, because they at this point had already uncovered surveillance footage that disproved a lot of what he was saying. And I'll get more into that later, but basically at this point, investigators tell him, sorry, dude, we don't believe what you're saying here is true. And in that same meeting, they end up confronting him about the allegation that he was obsessed with the Gabby Petito case. And Adam just literally admitted to it. And he said that he was infatuated by it. Not that he was interested in it. He was infatuated by the Gabby Petito case. But he tried to explain that he didn't mean anything by his comment to Maddie about her ending up like Gabby Petito. He said that he was just trying to make a joke. Really, dude? A joke? In what world is a joke like that even remotely funny? I mean, come on. To even try and convince them that that was a joke is just, it just shows you what an idiot this guy is. And get this. Adam also appeared to have fresh scratches on his face and his neck, but he said that they came either from gym equipment, a cat, or a dog maybe. Bro. Now believe me when I say there's a lot more to go over when it comes to Adam, his behavior, and what was learned in those first couple of days. But before we jump into that, I want to go over what was happening publicly in the case during this time. And in those early days and even weeks, the public was pretty much kept in the dark to protect the integrity of the investigation, which is understandable. But on Wednesday, April 5th, 2023, a press conference was held by the chief of the Winona Police Department to share that, based on their investigation so far, they believed Maddie's disappearance was both involuntary and suspicious. In this press conference, Chief Williams also shared that surveillance video collected thus far has given them insight into the movements of Maddie's vehicle that day. He shared that a van, similar to the van that Maddie drove, could be seen driving south on Highway 43 towards Fillmore County. And later, that same vehicle can be seen traveling north on Highway 43 back towards Winona. And if you remember, Adam claimed to take that same route in Maddie's car. Interesting. But this press conference wasn't about exposing Adam's lies. All the chief said was that Adam had taken a trip in Maddie's van and that when he returned home, Maddie was gone. Just take a listen.
During the course of our investigation, we know that Maddie returned to her residence on Ferry Drive in Winona around 8:15 a.m. on March 31st. The vehicle that Maddie normally drives is a 2014 dark blue Chrysler Town & Country minivan, depicted to my right. The father of Maddie's children has spoken to law enforcement and told us that he left the residence in Maddie's van around 10 a.m. and upon returning later in the day, Maddie was not home. We believe a van similar to Maddie's van was driven on County Road 12 and Highway 43 in Winona County, and then southbound on Highway 43 through the eastern part of Fillmore County. Later, a van similar to Maddie's traveled back toward Winona on Highway 43. All of this occurred between approximately 10 a.m. and 1:30 p.m. We believe the van remained parked in the driveway of Maddie's residence from 1:30 p.m. on. Nothing to date has indicated that Maddie left the residence on foot or in another vehicle.
And then later in this press conference, it was also shared that her jacket, phone, wallet, and ID were found, and that areas by her residence and along Highway 43 were being searched.
Inside the residence, investigators located Maddie's phone, the jacket she had been wearing earlier in the morning, along with her wallet and ID. Maddie's family and friends tried to contact Maddie throughout the day on March 31st without success. It was unlike her not to respond. Based on all of this, we believe Maddie's disappearance is involuntary, suspicious, and we are all concerned for her safety. Law enforcement began searching areas nearby Maddie's residence and along Highway 43 in both Winona and Fillmore counties. Our search efforts have been ongoing.
And when it came to search efforts in this case, like I said earlier, Winona has a strong community and people showed out in numbers that we almost never see. The weekend of April 7th, there were several large-scale search efforts going on with over 2,000 volunteers. The amount of people that came to help perform ground searches was so overwhelming that they were able to cover all of Winona and about 24 miles south into Rushford. There was truly an outpouring of support for Maddie and for the Kingsbury family, and I can only imagine how much this must have meant to them in those times. Maddie has been described as a daughter of Winona because it's where she was born and raised, and everyone, including the mayor, made it their mission to find her. Even her brother Stephen, who was stationed overseas in active duty, flew home to help be part of the search. Now, that massive search was officially called off by April 10th. However, that was not the end of their search for her. A $50,000 reward was posted, and a press release came out that said they were still actively looking for Maddie with the help of the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. Searches by foot, air, and water were still actively going on, especially the water, considering they were right on the Mississippi River. And I also want to give some major recognition to her sister Megan, who jumped right to social media, specifically TikTok, to try and raise awareness about her sister's disappearance. And TikTok can be a great tool for families to use, so I'm happy they were able to do that.
TikTok, I need you to do your thing. I need your help. This is my sister, Madeline Kingsbury. She's missing. This is just very basic info that we've put on flyers and things around town. This is a good picture of her, how she looks now, short hair, etc. I'm just going to leave that in the background. It's now Monday, April 3rd. My family and I are in Winona, Minnesota, working with investigators, huge groups of people. We had a search party of friends, family, and peers go out yesterday. Nothing. If you want maybe some more details, I don't know what's been released yet by police to media, if anything yet. You can Google her name. You can look me up on Facebook, Megan Kingsbury, and my posts about her with her information are shareable. So please share. If you know anyone in Minnesota, in Rochester, Minnesota, La Crosse, Wisconsin, Mabel, Minnesota, anyone, Fillmore County, Minnesota, anyone around here, especially if it's you or someone that you know, please share that information. Help us find her. She's got 2 kids. She's my best friend. She's my little sister. We need to get her back. Please help us.
Megan posted updates on her sister's case almost every single day and really played a critical role in rallying support for her sister and the rest of their family since the very beginning. And one thing that I really admire about her is how she kept the focus on Maddie, and she held her composure and, delivered these TikToks with grace during such a stressful, unimaginably painful time. And of course, you have to keep in mind that their family had their own suspicions and theories about what had happened, but at no point did any of them bring any of that in. They kept the focus on the investigation and on Maddie. The police had not yet named a suspect or person of interest in the case at this point, and despite wanting to talk about it, they just knew it wasn't what was best for finding Maddie or getting her justice.
All right, check in. It's the 24th. It's a Monday. Still have not found my missing sister, Madeline, who's been missing since the 31st of March. If you're new here, I have videos on my page. You can look up her name on Google, Madeline Kingsbury. But yeah, we still have not found her. As far as person of interest or a suspect, law enforcement has not named anybody as of right now. So, the questions I get about that, I can't answer. I wish I could, but I can't.
But even if they weren't talking about Adam's possible involvement online, the rumors were swirling because, and this will not shock you, I'm sure, but at no point did Adam get involved in any of the search efforts or any of the press conferences at all. Because of course he didn't. He did make a brief little pathetic plea on Facebook for anyone to come forward with information, but other than that, dude was making zero effort. But of course, he was well aware of the rumors. So on April 12th, he released this statement. Over the course of the last 12 days, my family and I have been subject to a myriad of accusations regarding the disappearance of the mother of my children, Maddie Kingsbury. During the last 12 days, I have cooperated with law enforcement at every turn, including sitting down for multiple interviews with Winona County law enforcement. I did not have anything to do with Maddie's disappearance. I want the mother of my 5-year-old and 2-year-old to be found and brought home safely. I want that more than anything. Law enforcement advised me on April 2nd that they would not recommend that I attend press conferences or that I assist in the searches due to safety concerns. However, my non-attendance and silence has been inferred by many as a sign of apathy or worse. That could not be any further from the truth. I want Maddie home and for her to be able to be with our 2 children. God bless the Kingsbury family and please bring her home safely. So from that, you can tell the reason he claimed that he wasn't showing up for any searches or wasn't participating in anything is because law enforcement told him not to. And guess what? That is not true. And we know that because law enforcement released a statement of their own, basically saying, yeah, we never said that. Maddie's family also released a statement that day, and it reads in part, nothing in life prepares you for this. The disappearance of our daughter and sister has been a waking nightmare with no respite. In the days and nights since Madeline disappeared, the immediate family and extended family have, collectively and individually, been experiencing emotions and trials that someone who has never been suddenly thrust into this horrific situation could ever imagine. It then goes on to say, we will continue to search for Madeline. We will not give up, and our family will come out of the other side of this forever changed, but forever grateful for the tireless dedication of so many helpers, friends, and relatives, people in law enforcement, other first responders, social workers, caseworkers, legal professionals, child advocates, and many, many more. And I'm so glad that their family got so much support. That isn't always the case for everyone, but like they said, nothing in life could possibly prepare you for a situation like this. And Maddie being missing wasn't the only thing that they were dealing with and fighting for. They also had to fight for the custody of her kids. And Adam, of course, did not make that easy. Right around the time that rumors were swirling about his involvement, it was reported that he was uncooperative when handing over custody of the kids. Right after Maddie disappeared, he had both their kids with him at his parents' place. But it turns out that he never had legal custody over the kids to begin with because he and Maddie weren't married. So 4 days into her disappearance, the Department of Health and Human Services were called to take the kids into their custody. And of course, Adam put up quite the fight. Court documents say that he became non-cooperative with officials, that he locked the children inside the house, and that a social worker could hear him shouting expletives. He obviously eventually gave the kids over because he had no other choice, but clearly it wasn't willingly. And after all this, a judge ruled that the kids would remain in the custody of the Kingsbury family. And that's exactly where they should be, if you ask me. And while we're on the topic of Adam and the shit he tried to pull, I need to start going over what else investigators were able to find out about him and his relationship with Maddie. So in the midst of trying to find Maddie, investigators turned to her family and friends to try to learn as much as they could about what was going on in her life, of course. And I did already share some of these details, but there is more. For starters, Megan wasn't the only one that knew about Adam's Gabby Petito comment, the one about if she didn't listen up, she was going to end up just like her. She had actually confided in several people about this comment, and they had begged her to report him But she was afraid, understandably. She was afraid that he would be arrested, and she was worried about what effect that would have on her children. Maddie also confided in her parents about other times when Adam had choked her. And actually, in one instance, her dad and her stepmom drove over to her house and took her and the kids back to their place where they knew that the three of them would be safe. But she only stayed for 3 days because apparently Adam was mad that she left in the first place. Her father, David, had actually warned Maddie that he was afraid that he actually may kill her. And this is not victim blaming in any way, but she definitely minimized what was going on. It was almost like she was trying to convince herself that wouldn't happen, that was not the reality that she was in. And I think, it's really hard to understand what it would be like to be in that situation when you have children involved. It makes leaving so much more difficult. And as we know, she was in the process of leaving. So I do not want to see any victim blaming comments. She should have done this. She should have said that. There's no point. It is not helpful. And we're just going to move right along here. And now I actually want to read you a text exchange between Maddie and Adam. And I think it's really going to put into perspective how abusive and horrible he was to her. But before I get into these messages, I just want to let you know, just want to give you a warning that these are very disturbing, could be very triggering to some of you out there. If you have experienced abuse, know someone who has, or are currently experiencing this type of manipulation and abuse. And if you are, I am going to have resources in the description box for you if you are currently experiencing domestic violence. Maddie said, I'm really not okay with or over the fact that you put your hand around my neck and pushed me down in front of the kids earlier. So don't. Not okay with it at all, but especially with them there. And then Adam responded, you'll adjust. That's right. You'll adjust. The nerve of this fucking guy. So then she responds and says, the fuck I will. You do that again without asking me and you can go somewhere else. And he responded, you got it, mother. And that right there just shows you how manipulative this man is. Maddie then says, don't patronize me. That crossed a line. And Adam goes, then mind. And Maddie lastly replied by just saying, stop. So yeah. Those messages are just absolutely horrific and really tell you everything you need to know about Adam. And there are more stories like that, actually. There was a friend of hers who told investigators that one night they were FaceTiming, and while they were on the phone FaceTiming, Adam slapped Maddie in the face. And what makes it even more upsetting is that apparently Maddie was holding her daughter when this happened. She was holding her in one arm, FaceTiming with the other, and Adam came in upset about something and just slapped her across the face. And that same friend told investigators that there were multiple times where they were FaceTiming and she observed bruises on Maddie's face. And she told them that Adam had threatened to kill her if she ever left him, which at this point, that's not surprising to hear at all. And so just think about that. He said that if she ever left him, he would kill her. And what was she in the process of doing when she disappeared? She was in the process of leaving him. And she was also very vocal in the week leading up to her disappearance that Adam was making her feel uncomfortable. She told her mom that he was following her around the house, sort of looming over her. And she said that she didn't feel comfortable even being there. So her mom suggested that she stay at her friend Katie's house, and she did end up going over there for a few hours, but then she went to see Spencer and celebrate his birthday. And if you need a reminder, Spencer is the guy that she had reconnected with from college, and it turns out Spencer was actually in the same fraternity with Adam. He said they never really had many conversations, like he did not know him well, and obviously he knew things about him from Maddie. But the two of them were really starting to build a beautiful relationship together. Maddie had, according to him, told him that she loved him, and it broke my heart listening to his interviews. He's talking about how he wishes he had said it back, and he feels that his future disappeared the day that she did. And for anyone wondering, Spencer has been completely cleared by investigators. There's no motive, and he had a rock-solid alibi. Adam, on the other hand, not so much, right? And everything, and I really do mean everything, was pointing to him being the person responsible for Maddie's disappearance. So let's start going over more of the concrete evidence against him, okay? Starting with that video surveillance that I mentioned earlier, which contradicted his version of events. At 9:44 a.m. on March 31st, a neighbor's security camera captured a person in the driveway of Maddie's house wearing a light-colored coat. and they can be seen walking up to her minivan and then removing the front license plate. Interesting. And then this person can be seen 3 minutes later putting on a new one. Next at 9:55 a.m., that same person gets into her van, and by 10 a.m., the van is no longer in the driveway. Then at 10:02 a.m., the same van can be seen at a nearby gas station, and someone who matches the description of Adam Fravel can be seen pumping gas. And if you remember, Adam told authorities that he had went and put gas into Maddie's car. Oh, and by the way, when investigators ran the plates, they were registered to Adam. So in what world would he need to put his plates on her car to drive boxes over to his parents' house? Doesn't make a whole lot of sense, does it? And when investigators went to their house later that night after that friend had called for the welfare check, Maddie's original plates were back on her van. Okay? I'm sorry, but that is so suspicious. And then next at 10:31 a.m., Maddie's van is seen back in her driveway. And like we know, Adam said that he came home after getting gas to load the boxes into her car. Then, almost a full hour later at 11:26 a.m., the van is seen leaving their driveway again. For the next 30 minutes or so, a vehicle that matches the description of Maddie's van is observed on multiple surveillance cameras traveling south on Highway 43 in the direction of Rushford, Choice, and Mabel, which, may I remind you, is the same direction that Adam said he drove her van, leading any intelligent, reasonable person to assume that the person seen driving the van was Adam himself. However, according to Adam, he had left his home around 10:30 a.m. and was back by noon to find that Maddie wasn't home. But according to the digital evidence, he left around 11:26 a.m. and wasn't home until about 1:30 p.m. And that same digital evidence suggests that there was a 45-minute window of time where the van is just completely unaccounted for. From 11:59 a.m. to 12:44 p.m., there is no footage to suggest where he went or what he did. But what we do know is that at 12:44 p.m., the van was seen traveling in the opposite direction, north on Highway 43, back towards Winona. And then finally, at 1:28 p.m., Maddie's van is seen pulling back into her driveway. And at no point was Maddie ever seen exiting her house, even though Adam said when he returned, she wasn't there. So riddle me that. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are wondering if at any point Adam was seen or maybe someone else was seen, since there was surveillance pointing in that direction, carrying something heavy out of their house. And right now, to my knowledge, I'm not sure, to be honest. That doesn't mean that footage doesn't exist. It just hasn't been reported on yet. Now, everything that I just shared with you was information investigators were aware of from very early on. And as you can imagine, this information informed a lot of where they decided to search. Clearly, the van was headed in the direction of Adam's parents' house, but it never quite got there. It did, however, get as far as Rushford, and so that's where they focused a lot of their searches. And on June 7th, those search efforts paid off. That day, a deputy with the Fillmore County Sheriff's Office was searching a rural area in Fillmore County, and he came across human remains in a culvert wrapped in a gray fitted bedsheet. Now, a culvert is like a pipe or arched tunnel designed to allow water to flow under a road, and it was in one of those, just off of a gravel road, where Maddie was discovered. Her remains were not only wrapped in a bed sheet, but also black Gorilla Tape had been used to secure the sheet around her body. A medical examiner later revealed in her autopsy that a bath towel had also been wrapped around her head, and her cause of death was listed only as homicidal violence. And obviously, this was a huge discovery for the investigation, but it was unimaginably devastating to her loved ones and to the whole community. I mean, heartbreaking really doesn't even begin to describe it.
Law enforcement has confirmed the remains are those of Madeline Kingsbury.
Audible sobs from Maddie Kingsbury's friends and loved ones Thursday afternoon after law enforcement confirmed their worst fears had come true. Human remains found in Fillmore County were positively identified as their beloved Maddie.
Now, what's especially interesting about where she was found is the fact that this road is on a property that had been routinely maintained by one or more members of Adam's family. It wasn't their property specifically, but it is property that they were all pretty familiar with. And what's also interesting is that this area had been searched before, but I guess her body had been concealed in a way that the first time they checked this area, they didn't end up finding her. And I don't think as parents, as siblings, as friends, as loved ones, as a community, that anything could prepare you for a discovery like this. I mean, of course, their goal had always been to find Maddie, but even as the weeks went by, they tried to hold out hope that maybe she was still alive. And now that they knew that she wasn't, their focus turned 100% to finding her killer. Thankfully, though, an arrest came very quickly. The same day that Maddie's remains were found, Adam Fravel was arrested at his parents' house on 2 counts of second-degree murder. He was held in the Winona County Jail following his arrest, and his bond was initially set at $1 million.
The last 69 days have been frustrating, full of heartache and pain for the family, law enforcement, and the community. But during this time, the family never gave up. Law enforcement never gave up. The community never gave up.
And at the end of June, a public memorial service was held at Winona State University. And just like this community had showed up for this family in searching for Maddie, they also showed up big in helping honor her.
Maddie Kingsbury's family and friends reflecting on her life and her death at a memorial in Winona. It was that community that came together to help find Maddie and bring her home.
And now they are together again, but this time they are remembering her life and all the lives that she touched.
Yeah, today our cameras stayed outside out of respect to Maddie's family, but inside, a live stream captured a lot of emotion.
The path to healing will be long and twisted. The destination seemingly out of reach.
On the campus of Winona State University, family, friends, and strangers from across southern Minnesota gathered one last time. For more than 2 months, they've come together in the search for Maddie Kingsbury. On Sunday, the community gathered again, not to search, but to mourn.
Rightfully so, we are angry and hurt, and at times bereft of any feelings at all. We now only recently have been able to try and grieve and someday heal, and it'll take a long time. That's okay. It's important that we don't let these feelings overshadow what an absolute gift she was.
Madeline is no longer alone, and she's no longer suffering. Madeline's spirit will live on in her children, her family, and friends, and in the community here in Winona that she loved so much. We will forever remain loud for Madeline.
Then in October of that year, Adam was indicted by a grand jury on additional charges, including 2 counts of first-degree murder, in addition to his 2 counts of second-degree murder. And if convicted, he is set to face a sentence of life in prison without parole. And his bail was reset at $3 million. Now, I've already shared a lot of evidence with you, but there's actually more to go over. So let's get into that. So after Adam's arrest, several sealed documents were unsealed and released to the public. And I want to go over some of the main findings that I haven't already talked about. Remember earlier when I said that some of the items they found in the house ended up having significance later on? Well, that evidence ended up being a roll of black Gorilla Tape, as well as a fitted bed sheet that was missing from an air mattress. And considering that now Maddie had been found wrapped in a fitted bed sheet with black Gorilla Tape wrapped around it, they realized that this was connected. Investigators also believe that they can match the towel wrapped around Maddie's head to a towel that she and Adam owned. These unsealed documents also revealed information from a search warrant that was executed on Adam's parents' house back on April 7th. And it turns out that investigators not only found several electronic devices thrown out into a dumpster on the property, but near that dumpster was a burn pit with what appeared to be a piece of a heavily burned laptop. Now, I'm not entirely sure what evidence was retrieved from that device. However, it's a burned laptop. A burned laptop is a burned laptop. It, doesn't look good no matter how you spin it. And then there was this. 10 days after her disappearance, a neighbor of Adam's parents was going through their trail cam footage when they spotted Adam driving a Polaris Ranger UTV near their property with what appeared to be the handle of a shovel in the bed of the vehicle. And after comparing some footage, officers confirmed that the shovel seen on the trail cam was a match to a shovel seen on body cam footage from their home. And here's why that matters. Investigators ended up bringing in 2 cadaver dogs, and both dogs independently alerted in the bed of the UTV as well as on that shovel. Now, his family has tried to make excuses for this, and it pisses me off because it is just so ridiculous on so many levels. But they tried to say that that is because that week, Adam's dad had moved a dead raccoon with that same shovel, and that's why the dogs had alerted on it. But these dogs are trained to alert on human remains. Now, one of the next big things outlined in these documents is the fact that Adam appeared to go to great lengths to conceal his location, starting the day before she went missing. On March 30th, it turns out Adam had turned off the geolocation tracking feature on his phone, as well as the location services for each of his 4 Gmail accounts. And get this, Adam had removed the home security system that he had installed in him and Maddie's house, as well as the home security system that was installed in his parents' house. Interesting. And not only had he taken these security systems down, he also removed the SD cards from them. Now, this won't come as much of a surprise to you, but of course, Adam and his attorneys have argued that the reason he took down the system at their house was because they were in the process of moving. But that doesn't explain at all why they were removed from his parents' house as well. They weren't moving. Plus, Adam had actually studied computer science before he had dropped out, and many have said that he was very tech savvy. So let's go over all of the big pieces of evidence here just so that we're all on the same page, okay? So we've got the countless stories that detail the abuse that Maddie was experiencing at the hands of Adam Frame. We have the gorilla tape and the missing bedsheet from their home that appear to be connected to the tape and bedsheet that were found around her body. There's the fact that Adam's whereabouts don't align with the movements of Maddie's van that day, including a 45-minute window where the car is just unaccounted for. And let's not forget the license plate was swapped on her van as well. And we know he also turned off his geolocation on his phone and his email accounts, as well as removed the home surveillance from his property and his parents' property. Not to mention the trail camera that showed Adam riding around in a utility vehicle with a shovel. And both the vehicle and the shovel were alerted on by cadaver dogs. So let's get into talking about motive, because that really pushes things over the edge. First of all, as a reminder, we know that Adam allegedly told Maddie that if she left him, he would kill her. So there's a motive right there. But prosecutors argued that the reason that Adam killed Maddie was because of financial stress that he was experiencing. And back in April, he admitted to law enforcement that he depended on her financially. And now that she was leaving his sorry ass and moving on, potentially with someone else, which I'm sure he didn't like that either, that financial support wasn't going to be there anymore, was it? They also believe that Maddie's $170,000 death benefit may also have something to do with it, and I agree. Now, she didn't have Adam listed as the beneficiary. She actually didn't have anyone listed, so the money would have gone to her kids. And maybe in his delusional, stupid little mind, he thought that somehow that money was going to come to him. So with all that being said, let's get into the trial, shall we? Starting with the preliminary hearings. So those picked up in January of 2024. And over the course of the next few months, the defense would end up filing a ton of motions. The big ones include a motion to dismiss the charge of first-degree murder, as well as a motion to suppress Adam's interview from April 2nd, and a motion for a change of venue. Basically, they didn't think there was enough evidence to charge Adam with first-degree murder. Okay. And thankfully, that motion was denied. As for Adam's interview from April 2nd, they argued that he wasn't read his Miranda rights, but a judge did in fact rule it as admissible. And while that part was good news, the bad news is the audio and video from his interviews were all suppressed, which means we will not be able to see them or hear them. Now, when it came to the change of venue, however, a judge did rule in their favor. And that's basically because of the publicity that this case got in Winona. There was really no way that Adam was going to receive a fair trial there. And the decision was actually largely due to the fact that the defense put out a survey in Winona asking if people had heard about the case and had already made a decision about Adam's guilt or lack thereof. And a lot of people said yes. So instead, he was tried at the Blue Earth County Justice Center in Mankato, Minnesota. And about a month before trial began, a pre-trial hearing was held where a lot of Maddie's friends took the stand to testify regarding Adam's alleged abuse, his financial dependence, and also his lack of parenting. And this hearing basically aimed to address which evidence and testimony could or could not be admitted during the trial. Now, the good news is a judge did decide that a lot of the evidence and testimony could be admitted. However, there were a few things that could not, and here they are. There was no testimony allowed about some statements Maddie made regarding her concerns for her safety prior to her disappearance. No testimony regarding general, non-specific statements of abuse by Maddie. No statements regarding a conversation that Maddie had with a friend about how to leave an abusive relationship. And no statements Maddie made to a friend the week she went missing, alleging about taking a child to the emergency room. And I know you guys probably have questions about some of those things. Unfortunately, they're not things I can answer because there's not information available regarding those. Something else that was really interesting and frustrating to me is that a judge ruled that nobody in the courtroom could wear anything that symbolized Maddie in any way. Like they couldn't wear any t-shirts or even things like pins or ribbons, anything that related to Maddie in any way, or even violence against women. And I guess I understand why. I mean, I think the judge just was concerned that wearing anything like that would compromise the jury's impartiality. But it's still just upsetting and frustrating to me that her family, her loved ones, the community couldn't come together in that type of unity. I don't know. I get it. It's just, yeah, it's frustrating. Also, the judge ended up ruling in favor of the defense's request to sequester the witnesses, which just means that anyone who is testifying in the case can't sit in the courtroom before they take the stand. And the point of it is basically to prevent a witness from changing their testimony to match someone else's, whether that's consciously or subconsciously. And lastly, and this is a biggie, cameras were not permitted in the courtroom. Now, this was something that was actually at the request of Maddie's family, who wanted privacy during the trial. And I support that 1,000%. Now, as far as the trial itself, it happened very recently, and that began with jury selection on October 7th. And because witnesses were sequestered, several members of Maddie's family were not able to sit in the courtroom as testimony kicked off. And I've spent most of this episode going through the case and the evidence against Adam, so I'm not going to make you sit through all of that again. I just want to highlight some of the key elements from the trial to give you a bit of an overview. As for opening statements, I think we all have a pretty good idea of the direction the prosecution went. They basically laid out the circumstances of the case and explained how the evidence will show that Adam Fravel was the person responsible for Maddie's disappearance and her death. And as for the defense, their strategy was to argue that investigators zeroed in on Adam and didn't consider other evidence that could point to other suspects. They also argued that the stories of abuse were unreliable and that Adam and Maddie's separation was amicable. And get this, they even said that any bruising that family or friends saw on Maddie's neck was from rough sex, which I don't know about you guys. I think that is straight up offensive and just completely dismissive of her abuse. So when testimony began that first week, it was mostly from officers and investigators, and it was described as very clinical, kind of just going over all the investigative efforts. And then in the days that followed, the jury also heard from the medical examiner who provided more insight into Maddie's cause of death. As I mentioned earlier, it was listed as homicidal violence, but he added that asphyxiation was most likely what killed her. The body cam footage from both Adam's conversations with investigators on April 1st and 2nd were also played for the jury, and his comments about Gabby Petito were addressed as well. Of course, that digital evidence was also a big topic of conversation, as well as Adam's efforts to conceal his location. And then on October 29th, Maddie's parents took the stand, and they each talked about Maddie and Adam's tumultuous relationship. And not only did they mention that Adam was of no help when it came to the kids, but they also each testified about times when Maddie had confided in them about the abuse that she was experiencing. I guess in November of 2020, they were actually living with Maddie's dad, and David was so fed up with Adam's behavior that he literally kicked him out and never spoke to him again after that. In total, the prosecution called 68 witnesses to testify, and they all took the stand over the course of 10 days. Now, as for the defense, they presented their entire case in under 3 hours and only called 5 witnesses to testify, and Adam was not one of those people. His brother, on the other hand, did testify, and he said that Adam was not a violent person and that he adored the children. And to my understanding, it's not just the brother that believes Adam is innocent. I know that his sister does as well, from an interview that I saw and from other sources. I think their entire family believes he is innocent and has stood by him. The jury, on the other hand, not so much, and we'll get to that in a second. So a neighbor also testified for the defense that he saw Adam and Maddie playing with their kids together outside of the house. And some deputies also testified about their search efforts in the area where her body was ultimately found. But like I said, though, the defense literally wrapped up their case in about 3 hours. Yeah. So closing arguments wrapped up on November 6th, and just 10 hours later, on the 7th, the jury came back with their verdict, and Adam Fravel was found guilty on all counts. And both counts of first-degree murder carry a mandatory sentence of life in prison. However, there will be an official sentencing hearing on December 17th back in Winona. Now, Adam was actually seen crying in the courtroom just before the jury came back in, and this is just my personal thoughts, but I really think those were tears for himself and not tears for Maddie or her family and friends who are going to suffer and deal with this pain for the rest of their lives. I mean, the verdict is great news, and I'm so happy that he is going to pay for what he did in a really big way, but it is never going to bring Maddie back. I hope he spends the rest of his miserable life crying. I hope he feels like absolute shit forever. I hope his dreams, his every waking moment is haunted by what he did, because not only did he do that to Maddie and to everyone who loved her, but he did that to his own children. He took their mother away. She is gone because of him. And spending the rest of his life behind bars is the least that can be done to rectify this situation. Her family gave a statement after the verdict was read, saying that they were glad with the outcome, but that there was no joy for the same reasons that I just shared. Words can just not express how devastated I am, and so many are, for this family. And I'm also just so impressed by their strength, by the way they've conducted themselves, handled everything with such grace through unbelievable pain. And I just hope that they're able to breathe a little bit easier now, knowing that Adam was at least found guilty and is going to pay for what he did. So this week, on behalf of Maddie, I am making a contribution to my foundation, the Higher Hope Foundation, and we are going to be looking out for applications that fall into the domestic violence category. It's something that we feel really strongly about, helping as many people as we can in that area, and I hope that this is a way that we can honor Maddie. Also, if you would like to show Maddie's family some additional support, there are a few ways that you can help. They have a Facebook page, which I'll link below, called Finding Madeline Kingsbury. They use this page to post a lot of updates as well as sell Justice for Maddie merch. And all the proceeds from that will be used to help their family recoup the money that they have spent on lodging to stay near the trial, as well as any money they've lost as a result of this tragedy. There's also a GoFundMe, which I will link below. This was originally to help fund their search efforts, and now I imagine that any new funds will go towards helping the family through the aftermath of all of this, including supporting her 2 kids. Which, by the way, I'm sure a lot of you are curious about this. The children are thankfully in the custody of the Kingsbury family. Those children have gone through a tremendous amount of trauma, and they probably will continue to go through that trauma and processing for a very long time. My heart truly goes out to them, and it goes out to everyone who loved Maddie and who lost someone that was so special. I mean, really, what a loss to the world. She was incredibly smart, incredibly driven, was going to help a lot of people. I mean, to be working at the Mayo Clinic was so huge. And I don't know how to describe Adam other than just such a fucking loser. And the fact that he took her life in the end of all this, it's just, it's so draining. It's so upsetting. There just aren't even words. But I'm just really, really thankful, really, really happy that in the end, justice is being served. And that is all I have for you guys today on this case. I definitely want to hear your thoughts below, so let me know. And I will be back next week to discuss another case. But until then, stay safe out there, friends.